Chapter 199. You're a virtuous director. Imperial Consort Su paused. Even if you can't give birth to a legitimate son, raising one in the future will be the same. You know what Immerse's personality is like. As long as you do what you need to do, then no one will take away what belongs to you. Her voice was gentle, but the meaning behind her words made people shiver uncontrollably. Princess Lu suppressed the coldness in her heart. No matter what Imperial Consort Su said, she responded respectfully. Of course, she knew Li Hongming's temperament. If she did her job well, what was hers would be hers. These words could be used to coax her a few years ago. Li Hongming didn't seem to be interested in beauty, and he respected his first wife. That was because he needed a good reputation, and that was because she was still useful now. If one day he ascended to that supreme position, Princess Lu was almost certain what would happen. As the saying goes, the more suppressed it was, the more serious it would be when it broke out. What's more, now there was an incomparably carefree and unscrupulous Prince Jean as a comparison. Don't look at how all the princes were deadpan and sanctimonious. To say that they weren't envious and jealous of Jean Qinhuang, it was almost impossible to find them. These people should also include the other children of the imperial clan. Most likely not a single one of them wasn't thinking, why could he be so unscrupulous, but they couldn't. When there were no more restrictions, it would probably become even worse. It was fine if he didn't meet the woman he liked. Then if she didn't make a mistake, she probably wouldn't lose the position of empress. If he met the person he liked, the cold palace might be the best place for her. Princess Lu saw all of this clearly. Her feelings for Li Hongming had long been wiped clean. Li Hongming maintained a good image on the surface, and she also played the role of a good wife and mother. She couldn't quit because of resentment. After all, if she couldn't be a princess, then she was not far from death. Moreover, it wasn't as simple as her life and death. She had 2 daughters. If they had a stepmother, she couldn't imagine what would happen to them. Even if she didn't care about the position of empress, she couldn't imagine that the one who would ascend the throne in the future wouldn't be Li Hongyuan. Because if that happened, her entire family would be destroyed. As the saying goes, one's glory is shared and one's loss is shared. No matter how bad that man was, she had to help him. Noble Consort Su sent Princess Lu away and sat there thinking. She also found that her youngest son cared about the 3rd young lady of the Luo family very much. But it didn't matter. Whether he really liked her or for other reasons, she wouldn't do the same thing as Duchess Ding. Maybe she would feel a little sad, but she was really scared by her son's reputation of bringing bad luck to his wife. Now they finally had a girl. Master Liaochen said that they were a match made in heaven, and nothing had happened to them until now. Even if she was dissatisfied, she would never show it. Otherwise, if others were inferior, the emperor would be dissatisfied with her. In actuality, she was quite glad that this girl had been given to her son and not to Li Hongyi to be his step-consort. If Madame Lu could sense it, then noble Consort Su as the person involved could also sense it. This girl wasn't a simple person. She was well aware of the power of pillow talk. If this talk was unorthodox, then it would be good to use it on the opponent. However, this girl didn't seem like someone who would do evil, so it would only have a positive effect. In addition, this girl had a powerful maternal family. It was good for the person who married her, but bad for the person who married her. Although it was a pity that she couldn't be used, it was better to let her be a useless chess piece than to let others have her. Li Hongyuan's leisure didn't last for 4 hours before Emperor Lu Qingdi summoned him. Li Hongyuan was very annoyed by his old man's summons, but because he had nothing to do, he didn't give his old man a hard time. At this time, Emperor Lu Qingdi had already finished dealing with political affairs, and Prince Rui and the Gong Prince were also present. It was as if the father and son were chatting with Lei Lei. After Li Hongyuan paid his respects, they didn't say anything and just picked up the cup of tea. Who was Li Hongyuan? At the beginning, perhaps he didn't understand the meaning of Emperor Lu Qingdi's words, but Emperor Lu Qingdi made it so obvious. If he still didn't understand, then he would have lived in vain. However, even so, he didn't intend to cooperate well. With a cold face, he looked at Emperor Lu Qingdi as if to say, "Are you idle?" Emperor Lu Qingdi didn't get a response, and Li Hongyuan's gaze made his balls hurt. He cursed in his heart, "You unfilial son." However, Emperor Lu Qingdi couldn't bring himself to directly ask for it. The others also looked at the confrontation between the father and son, not daring to say a word. It must be said that every time they saw Emperor Lu Qingdi suffer in the hands of Li Hongyuan as the other sons, they were envious and jealous, but in fact they were secretly happy. It couldn't be helped, who told them to often be trained like dogs by Emperor Luqingdi. So when they saw him sulking, their hearts secretly rubbed, feeling a great sense of relief. Get lost. Seeing Li Hongyuan was like a wooden stake, Emperor Luqingdi was so angry that he smashed the cup again. Li Hongyuan looked at the broken cup that was still 2 steps away from his feet. This old man was really afraid of hurting him, smashing things farther and farther away. Speaking of which, with your attitude, it would be strange if you didn't raise an unfilial son. However, as the saying goes, the heavens cannot be offended. Li Hongyuan only angered him on ordinary trivial matters. If he really became lawless, then no matter how much defection he had, it would be worn away. Li Hongyuan clicked his tongue. When Mu Gonggong, who was outside, heard his master's call, he immediately came in and presented a small box. Li Hongyuan took it and casually threw it to Emperor Li's personal attendant. This was originally prepared for Fu Huang, but I didn't think that Fu Huang would be so impatient. Iken will retire. Turning around, he leisurely left. Emperor Luqingdi was so angry that he almost fell backwards, cursing vile spawn. Vile spawn. It must be said that the guards outside were already familiar with these words. Their eyelids didn't even move. Emperor Li's personal attendant carefully held the small box. Just now he almost didn't catch it and it really fell to the ground. Perhaps not long after, his head would fall to the ground. He waited until Emperor Luqingdi almost vented his anger before he hesitated whether to present it or not. Stupid slave, still not bringing it over. Emperor Lu roared. Don't look at how Prince Jin was arrogant in front of Emperor Lu. Other people would still tremble in the face of his anger. Emperor Luqingdi held the box and subconsciously wanted to throw it away, but in the end he couldn't bear to and put it down. Prince Jin personally picked the tea. Before this official made the tea, he instructed this official to make sure it was done well. After tasting it, he left more than half of it to be presented to His Majesty. If it wasn't for Luo Peishan's words not long ago, how could Emperor Lu do this kind of shameful thing? But there was no other way up. As the saying goes, only things that people couldn't ask for would make people think of them and feel that they were precious. His other sons would give him some good things from time to time to show filial piety, but this evil creature, other than longevity, he never gave him anything. Even if it was longevity, the things that were sent were basically his rewards. Even if it was just a simple change, he wasn't willing. Being so perfunctory, so careless, Emperor Li's heart was very stifled. But unfortunately, he didn't treat imperial concubine Su like this. Food, clothing, all kinds of things, imperial concubine Su could receive them. Although it wasn't a lot, it couldn't resist that kind of intention. Every time imperial concubine Su liked it very much. Imperial concubine Su also very unkindly went to Emperor Lu to show off, making Emperor Lu more and more depressed. It was fine if it was just imperial concubine Su, but there was also Princess Min Xiang. Although the number of times was much less than imperial concubine Su, it was still far better than someone who didn't have anything. Therefore, if Princess Min Xiang had any opinions about Li Hongyuan, Emperor Lu would definitely be the first to show a black face. Your 6th imperial brother is so good to you, but you actually don't know what's good for you. Therefore, good and bad were all judged by comparison, but Emperor Lu just didn't compare this son with the other sons. Alright, the more those sons did, the more it meant that they had ulterior motives. It wasn't easy for his son to think of giving him something, and it was even personally picked by him. How could he not be happy? Naturally, after Li Hongyuan didn't present it to him for a long time, he couldn't help but take the initiative to ask. The most infuriating thing was that this vile spawn still deliberately angered him in the end. However, after his anger subsided, Emperor Lu held the box and chuckled. He called over the palace maid who was the best at making tea and had everything moved to the study, boiling water and making tea right under his nose. Then he personally took out a small portion. That small amount seemed to be able to clearly see how many there were at a glance. Seeing him treasuring it so much, the palace maid's hands trembled. It had to be said that as the emperor, what kind of good tea in the world hadn't he drunk before? Sometimes, palace maids like them would be able to bask in some of his glory. But now, the palace maid felt that if she dared to spill even one, he would. Emperor Luqingdi stared straight at it. Just as he mixed the tea, his nose twitched as if the room was already filled with the fragrance of tea. His 2 sons watched from the side, having the urge to cover their eyes. Their father's current appearance was really a bit unbearable to look at. Their hearts were filled with resentment and unwillingness, But more than that, they were helpless. They worked hard and suffered untold hardships, but they might not be able to get a smile from him. In the end, they were often suspected of having ulterior motives. But that person, he was relaxed. Perhaps even if he sent a blade of grass, it would be regarded as the most peculiar and rare grass by their imperial father. Even if it wasn't a treasure, it was still a treasure. The Gong prince's face was already a bit embarrassed, but Prince Rui was as usual, even jokingly asking Emperor Luqingdi for a sip of tea. "Can you be short of a sip of tea?" As expected, he was rejected, but his expression didn't change. Emperor Luqingdi impatiently tasted the tea. Obviously it wasn't steeped yet, it was still boiling hot, but he inelegantly blew on it and drank a little bit. That expression of enjoyment was like tasting the finest nectar. Prince Rui's expression was also a bit difficult to maintain. https://11/11807/6653222. Biku Pavilion Mobile Reading Website. M. Chapter 200. When Luqingdi finally finished his cup of tea, Prince Rui and Prince Gong finally asked to be excused. Standing here was simply suffering, so out of sight, out of mind. Perhaps they were provoked by Luqingdi, but after the two left, they didn't even bother to maintain the brotherly respect on the surface. They each returned to their own homes, each looking for their own mother. The resentment in Li Hongming's heart had reached a critical point. If he didn't vent it out, he might really do something unexpected. When he saw Imperial Consort Su, he directly kicked out all the servants, even forgetting basic etiquette and rules, venting his anger on Imperial Consort Su. The only place where he could reveal his pure emotions was Imperial Consort Su. Imperial Consort Su was calm and composed, leisurely drinking tea. When Li Hongming finally calmed down, she spoke with a bit of apology. "Are you done?" Mufei Aken was rude. Aken asks Mufei for forgiveness. Imperial Consort Su had always been strict with Prince Rui, but when he was in a bad mood she was a gentle and loving mother. "It's nothing more than your sixth brother and your imperial father's filial piety that made you unhappy. You're a big man, someone who wants to ascend the throne, yet you're acting like a spoiled girl. What's wrong with you?" Li Hongming's face was a bit ashen. "Mufei, don't confuse the main point every time." Imperial Consort Su glanced at him faintly. "This consort told you a long time ago that your imperial father won't pass the throne to your sixth brother. How many times has this consort told you not to take your sixth brother's favor to heart? Why don't you listen and insist on pestering him?" Mufei wants Aken to feel at ease, or at least explain things clearly to Aken. You always want Aken to feel at ease, but in fact, Aken only sees Imperial Father as his son. "We're nothing." Imperial Consort Su was silent for a moment, quietly looking at Li Hongming. "If you have any trust in this consort, you shouldn't say such things." Li Hongming's lips squirmed. "Mufei, Aken just feels terrified every time I see that scene. Your sixth brother is a devil. Even if the throne is passed to a child who is crying piteously for food, it won't be him. You can rest assured now." She had kept this secret for so many years and had repeatedly brushed off Li Hongming. However, at this moment she easily revealed the truth. Li Hongming's face was full of shock. Back then I personally saw the imperial noble consort die. I personally saw your imperial father cut open her belly. When your sixth brother was born, he didn't have the right to inherit the throne. As for the other things, no matter how much he obtained, it was only right. A large part of the reason why Ben Gong was able to obtain your imperial father's trust for so many years was because of the imperial noble consort and your sixth brother. As for the imperial noble consort's death, Ben Gong wants Ming-er, when you ascend the throne, don't bother with your sixth brother. At that time you will be the ruler and he will be the subject. He won't cause trouble for you anymore. As for the matters of these years, compared to your other brothers, you didn't suffer any actual losses." Li Hongming was silent for a moment before he gradually digested Imperial Consort Su's words. Even if sixth brother is a devil, it's naturally inauspicious. Imperial father isn't afraid. Your imperial father is the true son of heaven and will naturally be protected by the heavens. Your sixth brother has no power or influence. He's just an idle prince who can't affect the fate of the country. Furthermore, the imperial noble consort is imperial father's favorite. Your sixth brother is the only thing she left behind, whether it's a person or an object. Furthermore, Imperial Consort Su paused. The imperial noble consort was personally killed by your imperial father. In summary, if Yuan was born before her death, you really wouldn't have a share of this country. You'd better be sensible. The news that Imperial Consort Su threw out one after another made Li Hongming a little confused. Imperial father killed the imperial noble consort? Regarding this, you don't need to know the specifics. It won't do you any good. In the future, you just need to do your job well. You know your sixth brother's temper. If there's nothing, don't provoke him. As for the rest, as long as your imperial father isn't completely muddle-headed and sticks to his bottom line, no matter what he does to your sixth brother, you just need to keep silent. Li Hongming took 2 deep breaths. Although he wasn't afraid of people like the devils, it wasn't good to provoke Li Hongyuan. In the future he would naturally stay far away from them. Imperial mother, imperial father is so good to sixth brother. Well, sixth brother, it doesn't matter if he will or won't. Ambition is linked to the power in one's hands. Your sixth brother is living unscrupulously. Do you think he can't see clearly? The limitless sacred favor of the emperor could easily cause one to lose their way. If one couldn't see clearly, they wouldn't be who they were today. After all, having the favor and not having the authority was enough to drive a person completely crazy. Ming-er, in terms of intelligence, none of your brothers can compare to him. Moreover, Li Hongming didn't know what Imperial Consort Su's unfinished words were. However, his imperial mother had always been gentle and dignified. Other emotions might be shown when she was fighting with the concubines, but even then it was mostly an act. Thus, it was really hard to detect when her true emotions were. However, at this moment his complexion was really not good. He knew that it was just like how imperial father killed the imperial noble consort. He shouldn't ask about the specifics. You should be able to feel at ease now. Imperial mother, Ken is ashamed. Li Hongming lowered his head with a bitter expression. Just don't be so suspicious. If there's nothing else, then go back. Imperial mother is tired. Imperial mother, rest well. Ken will take his leave. The only people who knew about what happened today were me and your father. Don't let a fourth person hear about it. If any rumors were to spread, it would definitely anger your father. After so many years he has always felt guilty, but he is also deceiving himself as if he has forgotten what he really did. If his wounds are opened again, the consequences are not something we can bear. Imperial mother, don't worry. Ken knows the severity of the matter. Go. Li Hongming's mood suddenly brightened up like a June day. All along, the opponent he was most afraid of was not Prince Kong, but Li Hongyuan. Because imperial power was supreme, no matter how much power you had, you couldn't resist an imperial edict. Even if you could kill the emperor and usurp the throne, you would still be a traitor. You would be criticized by later generations if you didn't have a proper title. Now, what he was worried about had never existed. Except for Li Hongyuan, who could compete with him in terms of the degree of favor. In addition, he had power in his hands. Haha. Li Hongming's smile was obvious. He almost looked up to the sky and laughed. Devil. These 2 words slipped from the tip of his tongue again and again. Ignoring Li Hongyuan's wanton arrogance, he became an inauspicious person in Li Hongming's eyes. A pitiful worm. Li Hongyuan didn't know Li Hongming's thoughts. If he knew, he would probably just sneer. A pitiful worm? What kind of expression would he have when he was stepped on by a pitiful worm like him in the future? For the sake of a so-called good reputation, he was timid. This thing was not even a fart in Li Hongyuan's eyes. Not to mention usurping the throne, even if the world was plunged into misery and suffering, he wouldn't bat an eyelid. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been a notorious tyrant in his previous life. The surrounding countries all shrank their heads and acted like cowards. Prince Rui returned to his own courtyard in a good mood. However, as soon as he entered the door, he was informed that concubine Ying had been making a racket and wanted to see him. To Li Hongming, Lu Jingying had lost her value. However, she still had a child in her belly. Although he didn't really care whether he had a son or not, having a child would still be more beneficial to him. At least no one would hold on to this point and not let it go. It wasn't like he was ascending the throne when he was still young. For adult princes like him, having an heir was also an important factor in whether or not they could ascend the throne. This was because the family valued inheritance and the emperor was even more so. Li Hongming thought about it and decided to go see her. At least he wanted her to know her place. If he kept making a ruckus, it would be annoying. Lu Jingying finally saw Li Hongming. Tears streamed down her face. He was very pitiful. Your Highness. She even forgot the rules and threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Before, Li Hongming might have been patient enough to coax her. Now his face was full of impatience. Because he felt the clothes on his chest were wet, he showed an extremely disgusted expression. You're all dead. Why aren't you pulling her away from this prince? Feeling Li Hongming's cold air before the servant girls could do anything, his personal attendant had already stepped forward and pulled Lu Jingying away from Li Hongming's body. Perhaps to prevent her from not letting go of his master, the personal attendant secretly used underhanded means to break her fingers. Lu Jingying cried out in pain. She felt that her fingers were about to break. Lu Jingying was probably used to being arrogant recently. She didn't even think before she threw a slap. Lowly servant, you have big guts. Ever since he became Prince Rui's personal attendant, there were a lot of people who tried to curry favor with him. When Wang Fei spoke to him, she would always have a somewhat amiable expression. Other than when his own master lost his temper, it was probably only when he was kicked by Prince Jin. That living king of hell, no one could afford to offend him. Even if he was kicked, it would be in vain. Don't expect anyone to make a decision for him. But now a little concubine slapped him? Resentment flashed through her eyes. With a bit of grievance, she quietly retreated behind Prince Rui. When you have value, you're a treasure. When you have no value, you're just a blade of grass. Li Hongming's face immediately darkened. He was a man who preferred gentle and chaste women. He didn't mind the occasional slow taste, but once he was tired, no matter what he did, it would be wrong. With a backhand slap, Lu Jingying was directly knocked to the ground. Lu Jingying covered her face. There were still traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. She didn't dare to look at Li Hongming. The man standing in front of her, he wasn't her husband, right? Clearly, a few days ago he was still hugging her and whispering sweet nothings into her ear. Wang Ye, you hit me. Daring to address Wang Ye as you and a concubine Ing, please pay attention to your status. The personal attendant behind Prince Rui reminded. Li Hongming couldn't see it, but Lu Jingying could clearly see the disdain and malice in his eyes. https://11/11807/6653223. Chapter 201. Luo Jingying was completely stunned at this moment. Her mind went blank for a long time. She couldn't return to her senses and didn't get up. The servants also looked at her coldly. Not only did they not go forward to help her, they even retreated a little. Everyone could see that concubine Ing had fallen out of favor. No matter if it was the servants who were sent to serve her early on or when she showed signs of pregnancy, they couldn't stand her temper. When the prince was around, she was obedient and charming. When the prince wasn't around, she was arrogant and domineering and didn't put anyone in her eyes. She was also unusually harsh to the people around her. She was generous when rewarding people, giving out gold and silver jewelry as if they didn't cost money. Unfortunately, she only had 2 or 3 people. Obviously, these people only had the sweetest mouths and were the best at flattering her. As the saying goes, don't worry about scarcity but worry about inequality. A few people were rich while many people were poor. How could she win people's hearts if she relied on her preferences? The sharp pain in her stomach made Luo Jingying come back to her senses. She hugged her stomach and cried out in pain, but still no one bowed to her. She had played tricks many times. When she was favored, they were still willing to surround her. But now however, seeing that her complexion was indeed not right, the 2 mamas looked at each other. Hurry and help her cheering up. As they spoke, they stepped forward to take her pulse. This time they were shocked. Hurry and call the manor doctor. This time the servants were really a little panicked. Even if concubine Ing was no longer favored, she was still pregnant. Under the circumstances where the prince didn't have an heir, this child was very precious. It was fine to step on a concubine who had fallen out of favor, but stepping on a concubine who was pregnant and out of favor was a big problem. If something happened to the child, they would definitely be the ones to suffer. Luo Jingying was helped up and sent back to the room to be placed on the bed. Then she found that there were bloodstains on her dress. Seeing this situation, everyone's heart jumped and they hurriedly notified the servants. The Fu doctor came quickly, followed by Princess Lu. Previously, Luo Jingying caused trouble, so the Fu doctor found that there was a slight change in the baby's energy, but it was not a big problem. How did you serve her? Everything was fine before. Princess Lu was very angry because she gave birth to the only 2 children in Prince Rui's mansion. Because of this, there were many rumors outside. They all said that she was playing tricks. Especially after the death of those concubines, she also hoped that Prince Rue's mansion could have more children, regardless of gender. Now, because of the special situation, it would take at least half a month before it could be announced to the public. Even the other two concubines in this courtyard didn't know, so naturally they couldn't do anything with great fanfare. What happened? Hurry up and tell this, princess. They couldn't bear the title of the main culprit, so they hurriedly explained the matter. Princess Lu was silent. When Prince Rue arrived, Princess Lu hesitated for a moment. Your Highness, concubine Ying's health is very heavy now. Why don't we deal with it after she gives birth? Prince Rue furrowed his brows. Clearly he knew that it was his fault for slapping the child just now. It was one thing to be annoyed by Luo Jingying, but the child was indeed his and he still went to the bedroom. At the moment Luo Jingying's face was pale and she was in a coma. She was moaning in a low voice, obviously enduring the pain. Perhaps because she sensed something, she opened her eyes. The moment she saw Prince Rue, she felt indescribably wronged. Tears welled up in her eyes. Your Highness. In the end, she wasn't stupid enough to argue with Li Hongming at this time. Li Hongming sat down by the bed. When Luo Jingying reached out to hold his hand, he didn't shake it off. However, as Luo Jingying whined and complained about how abominable her third sister was, she'd accused Li Hongming of not helping her and even hitting her for a servant, etc. Li Hongming showed impatience. If I knew you were so stupid, I wouldn't have wasted time on you. Until now, she still couldn't see her situation clearly. Her mind was only filled with love and affection. Her family was such a powerful backer, but she made a mess of it. Now he finally understood why Luo Peishan found an excuse to not let him directly take her as a concubine. It was obvious that he threw her to him as an abandoned person. If his status was high, it would be bad. Seeing him leave heartlessly again, Luo Jingying's hand was raised in the air as if she was struck by lightning. When Li Hongming was about to turn around the screen, she suddenly stood up and wanted to chase after him. Her current situation didn't allow her to run around. Naturally, she was pushed back by her nanny, who comforted her gently and asked her to put the child first. Prince Rue just said a few words to Princess Lu. Princess Lu squatted. See you off, Your Highness. Even though she already knew what kind of person this man was, she couldn't help but feel cold in her heart. She looked at the bedroom again. After all, she was still a little girl who didn't know anything. She was naive and ignorant. Princess Lu stood for a while and then went in. Yesterday she was arrogant in front of her with a face full of arrogance. Now she was like a withered flower. Maybe she was still worried about the child, so she didn't make trouble. Princess Lu waved the servants away and sat down by the bed. She flattered the powerful and stepped on the weak. Therefore nothing could happen to the child. Absolutely nothing. Come on, bring the medicine. Bring the medicine. Princess Lu walked out of Luo Jingying's yard. She paused for a moment and turned to Li Hongming's study. Li Hongming was practicing calligraphy. Princess Lu knew Li Hongming's mood very well because they had been married for many years. Although he was upset today, he was in a good mood, especially after he came back from outside. Greetings to the prince. Princess Lu, you are here. Li Hongming put down his brush and reached out his hand to her. Princess Lu took the opportunity to hold his hand and snuggled into his arms. She looked at the calligraphy on the table. It seemed that he was in a good mood. Without guessing why, she just smiled and said, Your handwriting is getting better and better, Your Highness. Li Hongming also chuckled. This was rare for him in his own territory. Is there anything wrong? Concubine Ying will be fine. Don't worry, Your Highness. Princess Lu, you can deal with these trivial matters. I believe in you. Li Hongming said casually. After all, she has just been married. She is arrogant and willful. She will gradually become better. Please be more tolerant of her. Princess Lu, you are so kind. Li Hongming said ambiguously. Princess Lu and I should have a son. As he said this, he directly carried Princess Lu and walked to the inner room of the study. Princess Lu exclaimed in a small voice. Then she pouted coquettishly, which made Li Hongming laugh. Princess Lu was once again sure that her prince was in a good mood. He would not do this kind of thing usually. Great elder princess invited Jingwan to stay until the evening. Jingwan was really in line with her fantasy of a daughter. Her biological daughter could never reach the height of Jingwan. Therefore she was very good to Jingwan. She even asked her youngest daughter Wengzhu Yuyao to learn more from Jingwan. Jingwan blushed with shame. She didn't know how an ignorant and incompetent person like her had become someone else's child. Fortunately, there was a large age gap between her and Wengzhu Yuyao. Wengzhu Yuyao wasn't a sensitive and naive child, and she really liked her. Otherwise, if she heard her mother say such things, her heart might become twisted and dark. https://11/11807/6653225. Mobile version website, M. I want 6 cousins. Okay. Jingwon was overjoyed. How old are you? You're so shameless to think about dowry. Great Elder Princess also felt funny. Yuyao stuck out her tongue at Great Elder Princess in disdain. What Jingwan could think of, Great Elder Princess could also think of. After Jingwan left, she would definitely ask about it carefully. Great Elder Princess had always pampered her daughter and brought up her son. She was dissatisfied with all her daughters who had been married off. Now she loved her youngest legitimate daughter the most. How dare Jingwan instigate Great Elder Princess in her ears? When Jingwan saw these things, she also felt helpless. However, Great Elder Princess just wanted to protect her, so she couldn't really refuse her coldly. Therefore, if some people were unhappy, she could only continue to be unhappy. The next day, Jingwan received more invitations, which were basically sent by the girls in the boudoir. After staying in the summer palace for a few days, almost all of them had settled down. Naturally, all kinds of banquets began again. In summer, there were very few banquets. However, the summer palace was much cooler than the capital city. It was really boring, so they naturally had to find something to do. Jingwan read several invitations. It seemed that they had discussed it and the dates didn't overlap. Jingwan thought that this might be a tacit understanding formed in the early years. After all, the summer holidays were almost at this time every year. At that time, they would set the dates of their banquets. If there were some deletions or additions, they would probably make adjustments again. To return the favor, Jingwan felt that she should also hold a banquet. However, she needed to think about the exact time and ask her sister-in-law about it. She would go out to attend 2 more banquets. It was better to follow a first-come first-served basis. Since someone had already set the time, there was no reason to force them to change it. Therefore, Jingwan turned to Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia's pregnancy had stabilized, but everyone was worried about her. She also planned to take more time to recover. Sun Yijia browsed through the invitations. Nominally, these invitations were set up by those unmarried girls. In fact, sometimes their mothers and grandmothers also sent some invitations. In the past, the banquet of the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs was set on June 20th. Now that grandfather is the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs, you can set the date on that day. With your current status, no one will be blind enough to go against you and fight for that day's time. With the Ruan family's current situation, they will definitely not hold a banquet. Furthermore, in the past few years, there were usually 2 cabinet elders who came to the summer palace. This year there is 1 less cabinet elder and there is 1 day left. If someone wants to fight for it, they will probably fight for 3 days. After all, although there is no rule that the time is arranged according to the status of each family, there are some people who think so. The closer they are to the front, the more they feel honored. Toward the end, Sun Yijia said with some indifference. Jingwan could roughly understand her thoughts. Based on her cold personality towards outsiders, she really didn't care about this kind of thing. Sister-in-law, did you send invitations here as well? Of course. Although it's not as valuable as before, I still want to save face. Moreover, the 3 of you are becoming more and more famous now. It's impossible for you to stop even if you want to. Look, you went out early this morning. You should know that this is all thanks to little sister Wan. Sun Yijia said with a hint of ridicule. It's because my 3rd brother is a genius. Jingwan said righteously. Those who didn't know would think that Jingwan was proud of her brother. Sun Yijia knew the inside story. She reached out and pinched Jingwan's face. She laughed and said, "You're getting more and more shameless. No one else would praise themselves as a genius." Jingwan slapped her hand away. It's true. Yes. A genius. In fact, Sister Wan was indeed worthy of this title. Jingwan wanted to play the zither again to give Sun Yijia's baby prenatal education. After she played 2 songs, Sun Yijia couldn't bear it anymore. She pushed her aside and played the zither herself. Jingwan didn't feel embarrassed. However, Sun Yijia didn't play for long. Just as Jingwan was about to leave, Sun Yijia handed her a small locked box and said in a low voice, "Sister Wan, you can go back and look at this by yourself. Don't worry and keep it. Don't think about rejecting it now. After you go back and look at it, don't think about returning it. If it's for you, it's for you." Jingwan naturally didn't want it. However, judging from Sun Yijia's expression, she really couldn't take it back. "Right, I'll keep it. Sister-in-law, you won't harm me. I, Sun Yijia, have harmed anyone in my life, but it's impossible for me to harm you, little sister Wan. Could be said that you gave me a new life. If I harm you, I should be struck by lightning." Sun Yijia's voice was soft and slow, but it was unusually solemn. Jingwan was stunned. Then she smiled and said, "So serious? I'll keep it well." As she spoke, she shook the small box in her hand. There was a slight clanging sound inside. It seemed that the thing inside was quite solid. After Jingwan went back, she knew that her sister-in-law must have her reasons for telling her to keep it well. She dismissed the servants and then took out the key to open the small box. She took out the brocade pouch inside. It was a silent shape. It should be a token. Jingwan's heart inexplicably beat a little faster. Whether it was in her previous life or in this life, she had never come into contact with something like this. However, she had seen similar things on television. Generally, as long as it was related, it was something that could take one's life. Jingwan opened the brocade pouch and took out the item. Very good. It was impossible to pretend that she didn't know the significance of this item. Then she thought of her sister-in-law's words. She could only keep it with ease. If she really sent it back and used it as an excuse, it would really attract other people's attention. After keeping the item, Jingwan decided to ask her grandfather how much authority this thing had. Luo Peishan was sitting under the shade of a tree. A servant was fanning him. He was especially serious as he flipped through a book. Jingwan walked closer. Grandfather really doesn't do proper work. Even if he has free time, he should read proper books. Luo Peishan glanced at her in annoyance. This indecent book was also made by you. Jingwan unruly bowed. She took the servant's fan with a grin and sat beside Luo Peishan. "It's not a big deal that granddaughter doesn't do proper work. But grandfather, you're different. One nose and two eyes. How am I different?" Jingwan chuckled. When she was in Cheat and Prefecture, why did she feel that her grandfather was serious and unapproachable? Why did she feel that he was a standard scholar official? Sure enough, people couldn't judge others based on their own opinion. "Grandfather, I want to ask you something." Luo Peishan glanced at her. Just as he was about to speak, he saw her glance at her servant. Thus he understood tacitly and sent him away. "Speak. What is it?" "Grandfather, how much do you know about the death exemption gold medallion?" Luo Peishan paused. His expression was slightly cold. But in the blink of an eye, he restrained the expression on his face. His eyes fell on the book again and he spoke casually. Obviously, Luo Peishan didn't know as much as old Madame Sunday. At least he didn't know that there was only one death-free gold medallion left. He only said what needed to be said and didn't ask anything else. https://11/11807/6653228. HTML chapter error. Chapter 203. Jingwan was different from the past. Even if there was a banquet hosted by a princess, no one would find fault with her. On the contrary, there was a group of people who complimented her. Even if she was not good at poetry, music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, even if she just sat quietly and acted like a little foodie, some people would still praise her. In fact, they were not simply circling around Jingwan. The various new skincare creams from Rouge Pavilion were a little expensive, but other than those exclusive sets, the rest were nothing to them. They did not feel any pressure to use them. Originally, no one would have investigated who made these creams. However, the Luo family had special privileges. Even if they were married, they would have enough preferential shares to use every month. Moreover, Jingwan herself was a moving living signboard. There would be a time when she would be noticed. Until now, these upper-class noble ladies basically knew that these creams were made by her. It was a matter of course. There had been no suitable opportunity before. Now was indeed the best time. As long as they were girls who liked to look beautiful, it was not surprising that they would look for Jingwan. Because these people knew their limits, Jingwan was also happy to tell them some skincare tips. As for whether there would be people who were greedy and thought that she did not tell the real secret, it had nothing to do with her. She was not obligated to do so. At most, these people would say a few words in private. They really did not dare to offend her in public. Therefore it was quite good to have a big backer. Jingwan felt that as time passed she would most likely fall. Because of such a relatively relaxed atmosphere, Jingwan even attended the banquets every day. When her biggest backer attacked her at night again, Jingwan was basically calm and collected. Seeing that a certain someone was simply hugging her to sleep, Jingwan even had the leisure to joke with him. For example, Yu Yao wanted to ask him for a dowry or something. Li Hongyuan only responded faintly. He would send it to her tomorrow. Jingwan just thought that he was joking. However, the next day Jingwan didn't go to the banquet because she was called by Great Elder Princess. No one dared to say anything in front of Great Elder Princess. Great Elder Princess ignored them. Jingwan looked at the things placed in front of her. There were a total of 10 things. 2 coral trees that were about half a person's height, a jade bottle that was more than a foot tall, a box of golden pink pearls that were soft and flawless, and a box of high-quality gems. The rough estimate of these things should be, well, because things are precious when they are rare, they are not easy to measure. In some people's eyes they might be priceless, and in some people's eyes they might be worthless. However, there is no doubt that these are the treasures of treasures. Mother, these things are. Great Elder Princess looked at her meaningfully and said with a smile, Hongyuan sent someone to send it here. Jingwan's heart skipped a beat, but her expression didn't change. I see. They are for Yu Yao, Great Elder Princess continued. Isn't it normal for a cousin to give something to his cousin? Jingwan chuckled. Whether they are biological sisters, cousins, Hongyuan has only sent something to Princess Minxiang. This time he sent so many valuable things to Yu Yao and specified that they are her dowry. Great Elder Princess looked at Jingwan with a faint smile which made Jingwan's scalp tingle. She didn't even know how to respond. If a cousin wants to add to his sister's dowry, he'll have to wait until she gets married. There are still many years to go. The crux of the problem is that he's not delivering the dowry as a cousin, but as a brother-in-law. Wanwan helped foster mother analyze the situation. Even though Jingwan was thick-skinned, she couldn't bear Great Elder Princess's gaze and her face was slightly hot. How can daughter guess what His Highness's intention is? But since it's been sent here, adoptive mother will help Yu Yao keep it. Great Elder Princess nodded seriously and said, well, since Wanwan asked me to keep them, I'll keep them for Yu Yao. It had nothing to do with her. She didn't want Yu Yao to do as she said, no problem. Well, if she hadn't said something wrong last night, she wouldn't have been laughed at today. However, he still made a mental note to Li Hongyuan. Although he made a mental note, he didn't know if there would be a day when he could settle the score with Li Hongyuan. Fortunately, Great Elder Princess didn't ask her when she said something to Prince Jin. Jingwan didn't want to lie to Great Elder Princess, who had also treated her as a family member. However, how could she tell her that her fiancé attacked her at night? Yu Yao had no concept of other things, but children seemed to be born with no resistance to bright round pearls and the like. Therefore she coveted that box of pearls. After knowing that it was hers, she hugged it and refused to let go. Pearls were relatively common. Of course, high-quality pearls were rare and only a few people had access to them. White and pink pearls were more suitable for children. Gold pearls were noble and didn't match with children. But this box of pearls was gold and pink. Gold was not heavy, so it was okay for Yao to use it now. The little girl already knew how to be beautiful. She clung to her mother and talked about what she wanted to use the pearls for. She wanted beads, earrings, bracelets, necklaces, all of them. Great Elder Princess seemed to be helpless, but her eyebrows relaxed and her eyes were smiling. It could be seen that she really doted on Yu Yao. However, as the youngest legitimate daughter of Great Elder Princess, she was born to be doted on. In particular, this princess didn't have an empty title like most princesses. She didn't get along well with her family and was not favored by the emperor. By the time it was June 20th, Jingwan's invitation had already been sent out. However, because old Madame Luo did not intend to interfere, she only invited unmarried young ladies to the banquet. The number of princesses and princesses was not small. It could not be helped. More than half of the people who followed the emperor to escape the summer heat were people with the surname Li. During this period of time, although she couldn't see them every day, she got to know them day by day, so she didn't feel any pressure to deal with them. The most difficult one to please should be Princess Minxiang, who had the highest status and was Jingwan's future sister-in-law. If she wanted to make trouble, she could only endure most of the time. However, Princess Minxiang was really afraid of Li Hongyuan. She wouldn't do anything that might offend him. Moreover, her mother, noble consort Su, also told her to get along well with her future sister-in-law. In fact, regardless of other things, basically not many people would reject Jingwan just by getting along with her. After all, Jingwan was very young in mind. These teenage girls were all treated as younger sisters. As long as they were not naughty children, she would be tolerant and considerate enough. In this way, they had no reason to dislike her. Although the purpose was to enjoy the flowers, in fact, Jingwan didn't prepare much flowers. Instead, she prepared a lot of food, various kinds of juice, and some ingenious little games. To put it bluntly, she prepared to let these children eat, drink, and have fun. He wanted to be the king of children. At the beginning, Jingwan only took the younger girls, such as Yu Yao and those who were about the same age as her. The others were more reserved, especially those girls who had just started to talk about marriage. Perhaps some people despised her in their hearts and thought that she was unruly and improper. However, as time went by, seeing that they really had fun, she seemed to have never been so carefree since she was a child. Moreover, at this time everyone was the same. If they had fun, they would have fun. Probably no one would go out and say anything. Even those who took etiquette nannies with them were not criticized. Forget it, she would just drag her good sisters down with her. As for those who were really reserved and couldn't let go, Jingwan also prepared some elegant games that didn't require much movement, such as crossword puzzles. Because there were changes, it naturally wouldn't be boring. Then there was the game of finding things according to the clues. The final thing would often be unexpected. Therefore, the girls who had never played these games couldn't help but want to play. And the final result was probably that they all went crazy from playing. Jingwan and the others were having fun here, but they didn't know that an urgent report was sent from the capital. Some areas in the south had continuous rain. Some experienced people said that the area would inevitably expand and there would be a flood. Because Li Hongyuan had been paying attention to it for a long time, he naturally received the news. In her previous life, it didn't happen so early. Li Hongyuan thought that he could change people, but he couldn't change the sky. In her previous life, it happened late, which could only mean that the report was late. In the end, it caused such a big disaster. Some people had already been replaced by Li Hongyuan, so the same thing naturally wouldn't happen again. When Lu Qingdi received the news, he immediately gathered all the officials and sons. This kind of thing couldn't be neglected. If there really was a big flood, the consequences would be very serious. Although it hadn't happened yet, it was better to believe it than not. If they were prepared, there wouldn't be any losses even if they couldn't use it. And if they could use it, the losses would naturally be much lower. In this point, Lu Qingdi could definitely be called a wise emperor. And Li Hongyuan's time had come. My beloved officials, put your heads together and come up with a feasible solution as soon as possible. Don't say that you have groundless fears. I also hope that in the end it will be groundless fears. Also, don't take things too simply and don't take it seriously. I want you to consider this matter in the worst possible way. Since Lu Qingdi had said so, the others naturally didn't dare to neglect. However, the Grand Secretary Yuan Ruizhong didn't stand for long and felt dizzy and weak in the knees. They hurriedly asked him to sit down, but there was no improvement. His complexion was particularly bad. Lu Qingdi hurriedly ordered someone to call the imperial physician. Yuan Ruizhong was suffering from heat stroke. Lu Qingdi's residence was located at the top of the mountain, which was the coolest place in the entire palace. In addition, there were many ice basins, so one could even feel the obvious coolness. But in the end, he was suffering from heat stroke? According to the imperial physician's explanation, Yuan Ruizhong was old and weak. When he went up the mountain, he was in a hurry and sweated. When he came here, it was suddenly cool and he couldn't stand it. Seeing him like this, Lu Qingdi frowned and finally sighed in his heart. He was indeed old. He waved his hand and asked someone to send him back. It was a busy time now, so it was troublesome to see Yuan Ruizhong's half-dead appearance. Yuan Ruizhong felt ashamed and hurriedly apologized. Speaking of which, it had been relatively peaceful for half a month. Everyone in the family closed their doors and he didn't hear any gossip. He only felt that it was as peaceful as before and his body seemed to be much more relaxed. He didn't expect that there would be a problem at this time. Was he really old? If he still stayed in the position of Grand Secretary like this, wouldn't it annoy the emperor? But it was indeed not a good time for him to resign. so he could only be thick-skinned and wait for the emperor to let him resign. Prince Rui watched Yuan Ruizhong being supported by people. Yuan Ruizhong's back was hunched and he left step by step. His mother was right. Yuan Ruizhong was really dying. He withdrew his gaze and focused on the current matter. Of course, no one would inform Li Hongyuan of such an important matter. At this time he was living in a courtyard outside the palace again. He wasn't as leisurely as others thought. He was looking at the geomancy map. The information he received was far more detailed than Lu Qingdi's. He found the reported locations on the geomancy map bit by bit and calculated the range of the rainfall. After all, it had been too long in his previous life. He couldn't remember many things so clearly. Moreover, what he knew was limited. He frowned slightly and circled the locations of the granaries and important dams. Finally, he was 100% sure that the situation this time would be much better than in his previous life. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. However, he still needed to find Luo Peishan for the specifics. There were many things that he needed to say. Master, Grand Secretary has gone back. How is the Yuan family? https://11/11807/6653229. Himmel. Chapter 204. Li Hongyuan was non-committal. The flood in the south was the most important thing. Yuan Ruizhong had been muddle-headed for 10 or 20 years. He should be helped to wake him up. As for whether he would be unable to recover from the setback or even die, or survive and have a great change in temperament. If he was still young, the latter was more likely. Unfortunately, he was already old. Perhaps the scene would be too exciting and he would not be able to catch his breath. However, if he could pull through, Li Hongyuan would probably admire him. That would also mean that he would be oppressed by him for a few more years. Grind. Li Hongyuan was not interested in the things over there. He should tidy up the things that should be sorted out. Eunuch Mu hurriedly stepped forward and began to grind swiftly. It must be said that grinding could be considered his specialty when serving Li Hongyuan. He was fast and good. After he was done, he gently stepped back. Li Hongyuan spread out a booklet in the shape of a booklet and thought for a while. Then he picked up a pen and wrote very quickly. The words were like his person. The strokes were vigorous and powerful. However, ordinary people might not understand. Even if they were scholars, unless they liked it very much, they probably didn't study cursive. Luo Peishan was different. He had passed the imperial examination for decades and had a lot of time to study things other than the imperial examination. If he couldn't understand, Li Hongyuan would probably throw 4 words at him. You have an undeserved reputation. It was said that a focused man was the most charming. Li Hongyuan was a handsome man. Perhaps because his marriage with Jingwan had been settled, he rarely had a gloomy aura. His eyes were handsome and his expression was focused with confidence. Few people could not resist him. If Jingwan was present, she might be tempted at this moment. He wrote 2 or 3 pages in a row. Be careful. Be careful in case the woman of the Yuan family silences him. Yuan Ruizhong could not stand it and die, but he couldn't be killed. That would be too boring. Yes. In fact, there was no need for him to remind them. His subordinates would have considered this point. It had been a long time since they had done something for the first time. They had more or less figured out the extent to which they had to do to satisfy their master. Yuan Ruizhong was sent home because of his mental and physical exhaustion. Originally, Lu Qingdi's people wanted to send him to Madame Yuan, but Yuan Ruizhong refused. When he found out what his own backyard was like, he was very glad that he refused at this time. Otherwise, he would really lose face. It was quite strange for Rui to enter the house in such a state. In the past, when he returned home, even if his wife did not personally welcome him, she would arrange for someone to take good care of him. Now he had been sitting in the hall for a while, but no one came to serve him. There was not even a sip of tea. He was already feeling unwell, so it was inevitable that he would feel unhappy. Knowing the current situation of the Yuan clan, Zhang Xian stood up and headed to the rear courtyard. The servants he met along the way were the same as usual. When they saw him, they saluted him politely. However, when they were approaching the main courtyard where the couple lived, they saw a maidservant running out in a panic. When she saw Yuan Ruizhong, her expression was as if she had seen a ghost. The first thing she did was not salute but turn around and run away. She did not have the least bit of etiquette. Yuan Ruizhong's face darkened. Anyone who saw it knew that something must have happened. Although he did not know what it was, The way to deal with this kind of situation was almost the same. Go and stop her. Wan Ruizhong's manservant obeyed the order and hurried to catch up. An ordinary servant girl in her teens could not be faster than a man who was a few years older than her. She was quickly caught up and then pulled back. The young maidservant knelt in front of Wan Ruizhong, trembling and crying miserably. She kept kowtowing, "Master, I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything. Please don't beat me to death, I beg you, I beg you. What did you see? What did you hear? Say it clearly." Wan Ruizhong said sternly. The servant girl seemed to realize that she had said something wrong. She glanced at Wan Ruizhong in fear and quickly lowered her head. She knelt on the ground and trembled. No matter what, she refused to say a word. Wan Ruizhong kicked her away. "Keep an eye on her." He went straight to the main courtyard. He wanted to see what kind of shameful things this family or his stepwife was hiding from him. Obviously, when Wan Ruizhong entered the courtyard, he found that something was wrong. Usually there were old maids guarding the gate of the courtyard. When he entered, he could see the servants performing their duties. But the gate of the courtyard was half open and he didn't see anyone. Wan Ruizhong subconsciously lightened his footsteps and did not push the half-closed door. After entering, he wanted to go into the room. However, he vaguely heard a sound. Following the sound, he found that it came from the pavilion in the courtyard. There was a curtain outside the pavilion. Under normal circumstances it was down, but now it was down. A few days ago it was his wife and daughter who accompanied him to admire the moon. Now, there was a woman's delicate panting and a man's rough panting. Moreover, there was more than one man. One of the men was obviously swearing, but the woman did not seem to be humiliated. Instead, she was more aroused and urged him. In exchange, another man's lewd laughter was accompanied by the sound of a palm slapping a certain place. No matter how embarrassing the voices were, Wan Ruizhong knew who the three voices belonged to. It was his stepwife and his two sons. As if struck by lightning, Wan Ruizhong stood rooted to the ground with a blank expression on his face. "Look at your hungry face. How long has it been since I fed you? But even if you do it, can you satisfy me?" The woman did not speak, but she snorted obviously. "Actually, I want to know whose child is Fengfei. Father, one of our brothers, or some wild man outside?" That's right, that's right. Tell us, whose child is she?" Wan Ruizhong's heart was much colder than the winter. It was so cold that his blood almost stopped flowing. "Why do you care who she is? Nominally, she is your sister. Do you want to touch her as well?" the woman said. In exchange, the two men laughed ambiguously. "The daughter you taught must be the same as you." Wan Ruizhong clutched the clothes on his chest tightly. His heart seemed to be fiercely pinched as if he was about to suffocate. He gasped for breath as if he would pass out in the next moment. At this time, a gust of wind caused the curtains around the pavilion to open a gap. That unsightly scene directly crashed into the depths of Wan Ruizhong's eyes. His dignified and virtuous wife. He still remembered her shyness on the night of their wedding. From that night onwards, every time they got married, she would be abnormally reserved. Sometimes he wanted to do something, but he was afraid that he would offend her. As time passed, he began to enjoy the warmth of their relationship more and more. But now she was so unrestrained. His two sons, even if they were not that outstanding, he was still quite satisfied. They were calm and steady, gentle and polite. If there were no accidents in the family when he retired, even if he could not become an official, he thought that the family would be harmonious. But now they were like two beasts. He thought that the family was harmonious, and he thought that no one could compare to his wife and children. In the end, this family was a den of prostitution. His wife and children were all beasts. Pooh! Wan Ruizhong could not bear it anymore and directly spat out a mouthful of blood. This scene happened to be seen by one of his sons. His pupils rapidly shrank and suddenly withered as if he was scared silly. "Father!" It was like a whisper. When the brother opposite him heard this, his body trembled. "What nonsense are you shouting?" As for Madame Wan, she was skilled in martial arts. But because of her absolute trust in the people around her, coupled with the ups and downs of the sea of desire, she was only vaguely aware of the strangeness outside. When she heard the word father, she instantly recovered a lot. Just as she was about to get up, the person behind her suddenly pulled away and rushed out. "Father!" It was accompanied by fear. No matter how deep he had sunk, he was now awake. Madame Wan sat up with a whoosh, her expression stern. The man beside her was scared pale. Juan Ruiz Hong, who had spat out blood, slowly fell down. But his eyes were filled with bone-piercing pain and bloodthirsty hatred. He was a scholar. He had the strength and bearing of a scholar. He was capable of doing things. Under normal circumstances he was amiable. He had probably never shown such an expression in his life. So much so that the man who ran out wearing only a piece of underwear hesitated, not daring to go forward. Old master, old master. The manservant who was in charge of guarding the young maidservant had somehow come in. Seeing the situation, he practically scrambled over to catch Juan Ruiz Hong, who was about to fall to the ground. Master, master. As he pinched Juan Ruiz Hong's philtrum, he took advantage of the cover to give Juan Ruiz Hong a pill. Juan Ruiz Hong's eyes were still open, but he was still staring at the pavilion. That appearance was as if he had died with his eyes open. His son was trembling in fear. The ugly thing under him drooped. Such an ugly appearance. Where was the modesty of a gentleman? Being stared at like that, his legs went soft and he knelt on the ground with a bang. As for the other two people in the pavilion, they tidied up their clothes and came out. Compared to the two men who were trembling in fear, Madame Ruan was much calmer. Although she was frowning, the focus was not on the fact that her husband had caught her in the act. She looked at Juan Ruiz Hong indifferently. How did you come in? It had been so many years. Although she had never encountered this old thing coming back when he was not supposed to, even if she did, she would be able to know at the first moment. She would be able to pack up at the fastest speed so that he would not be able to detect the slightest clue. It was reasonable to say that today should be the same. However, not only did Juan Ruiz Hong break in, she did not receive any news at all. Because she was absolutely relieved, she let down her guard. So much so that she did not even know how long Juan Ruiz Hong had been here. Juan Ruiz Hong's eyes widened. His finger trembled as he pointed at his stepwife. You. She was caught doing such an unbearable thing, but there was no fear, no guilt, let alone repentance. It looked as if it was impossible for him to break in. The rise and fall of his chest became more obvious. Master, master, nothing can happen to you. If something happens to you, wouldn't it benefit these adulterous men and women? This bitch wants to anger you. If you die, no one will know about their scandal. In the future, the Ruan family will be completely controlled by her. So you must hold on. You must hold on, master. Madame Ruan's gaze fell on the servant. Even if this servant was not one of her people, he usually gave her some information about Juan Ruiz Hong's affairs outside. With the courage of a normal person, he should avoid this kind of thing. But now he said such words. It would be strange if there was no problem. Madame Ruan was not in a hurry to deal with him. Instead, she looked around and did not see anything. However, the people who were supposed to be guarding outside did not appear. Madame Ruan suddenly smiled. She was very clear that she had fallen into a trap. This time it was not her daughter who did anything but her. And it was so ruthless. How many of her people did not know? That's right. In her opinion, being caught in the act by Juan Ruiz Hong was not a big deal. If he did not know, there were ways to deal with it. If he knew, there were also ways to deal with it. Although relying on Juan Ruiz Hong was beneficial, there were also disadvantages in the future. Her actions would be restricted. If he knew, the worst-case scenario was to kill him. The manservant's words seemed to have worked. Juan Ruiz Hong took a deep breath and slowly stood up with the help of the manservant. He walked forward step by step. He used to care for this woman as much as he loved her. Now he hated her as much as he felt pain. He swung his hand and slapped her. Bitch, I've been so good to you, so good to you. Madame Ruan's head only tilted a little. The current Juan Ruiz Hong was almost half dead. How much strength could his hand have? For her it was not painful at all. When I married you, you were already so old. I was still young and beautiful. Shouldn't you be good to me? Your body is not strong and not strong. Every time you are not interested, you are done. Isn't it normal for me to wear a green hat? You have many sons, so you don't have to look outside. Now your sons are almost useless. Your grandchildren can be found. They are young enough and there are many of them. Pa. Juan Ruiz Hong was so angry that he slapped her again. You lewd woman, lewd woman. Madame Ruan sneered. She had been afraid of breaking the vases before. Now she was a turtle in a jar. What else did she have to care about? The person hiding in the dark really knew everything about her. Then she was almost certain that she would not die. Her value alive was far greater than death. So she was now fearless. However, the other party did not make a move. Once he made a move, it was like a thunderbolt. This method was really likable. Moreover, everything was clearly under his control, but she did not notice it at all. This ability was really admirable. Juan Ruiz Hong, you can only scold me now. Other than that, what else can you do? Your life has been smooth sailing and you think you are infallible. What ability do you have outside? You don't even know what your own backyard is like. You were smart your whole life but also stupid your whole life. How does it feel to lose your integrity in your later years? If I didn't believe you, that's why I said you think you are infallible, stupid. If you didn't disguise yourself so well, Madame Juan sneered, a 16-year-old girl married an old man like you. Would she treat the nest of children who are much older than her as her own? Considerate in all aspects? Do you think you are the emperor? How shameless do you think you are? You actually did not doubt it and wholeheartedly believed it. Then you deserve to be played in the palm of your hand. You only have yourself to blame. Juan Ruiz Hong was trembling with anger, but he could not say a word to refute. Bitch, this old man wants you to die a horrible death, a horrible death. Whether I die or not, I'm afraid it is not up to you to decide. You have to ask the person behind you first. What do you mean? What do I mean? For 10 or 20 years it was hidden. Suddenly it was discovered by you. No one got rid of the gatekeeper. How could you come in? Madame Juan now seemed to have a broken jar and did not care at all. However, until the end no one knew what the result would be. As long as she was alive there was hope. She was dead, then it was all over. Juan Ruizhong's first reaction was not anything else. His family's biggest scandal was known by an outsider. And as the head of the family he actually needed an outsider's help to find out? How many people had laughed at him? Who is it? His old face was terrifyingly gloomy, as if he wanted to tear the other person into pieces. He seemed to be in better spirits than before. He really valued face more than the sky. What can you do if you know? Even if it was your past glory, I'm afraid you did not have the qualifications to make anyone shut up, not to mention the current you. What's more, I don't know. Madame Juan was no longer gentle and considerate towards Juan Ruiz Hong. Instead, she raised her chin slightly and looked at him with disdain. Juan Ruiz Hong really wanted to strangle her to death. Unable to bear it, he slapped her again. Sure enough, hatred could also support a person's spirit. This slap was heavier than the previous one. It was the best proof. You can also get angry at me. However, if you dare to hit me again, don't blame me for being impolite. There was a limit to her patience. The reason why she did not resist was because she wanted to keep a trump card. After all, she had never used martial arts outside. What if the other party did not know? Perhaps in the future she could catch him off guard. Not to mention other things, it would be good if she could escape. Sure enough, when Juan Ruiz Hong reached out again, she grabbed his wrist and threw it away. If Juan Ruiz Hong was not supported, he probably would have staggered. It was said that a woman had 3 obediences and 4 virtues, and treated her husband as her sky. He had never seen a woman who had committed a heinous crime still be so insolent. Juan Ruizhong's eyes were about to split open. Wei sure, I can't do anything to others but your Wei clan. Madame Juan, no, it might be more appropriate to call her Wei sure now. She laughed mockingly. Wei sure, do as you wish. She turned around and kicked the man kneeling on the ground. It seemed like a casual kick, but it was enough to make people feel heart-wrenching pain. Wait until the person behind you comes and tells you how to deal with me. Then come again. He watched helplessly as she entered the room and closed the door, but he could not do anything to her. He cared about his family, his reputation, and his face. However, when he met someone who did not care about these things, the one who was afraid of taking action became her. That woman had nothing to fear, but the 2 in front of him were his sons. He was old, but the dignity of a superior was still there. The other one was so scared that he immediately knelt on the ground. Wei Shi's reaction and words had greatly surprised them. However, they did not have the courage. This was their father. Even if he really beat them to death, they would not dare to do anything. However, this did not prevent them from begging for mercy. Father, son knows his mistake. Please calm down. Don't be angry and harm your body. Father, it's all because of that bitch who seduced son. Otherwise, son would not dare to offend stepmother even if you gave son 100 guts. Sir. It's all because of her that our family became like this. Think about it, when mother was still here our family was so good. Juan Ruiz Hong paused. Thinking of his first wife, he felt sad for a moment. However, it was useless to think about it at this time. Ever since Wei Shi married into the family, he had rarely thought of his first wife. In the first few years, perhaps he wanted to go to the temple to do something for her and bury her in the ancestral grave. This was a long journey. Perhaps he could get some incense when the ancestral house offered sacrifices. Wan Ruizhong staggered, obviously a little tired. Evil creature, get out and put on your clothes. He rolled and crawled away. Wan Ruizhong glanced at the closed door, straightened his back, raised his head slightly and went outside. He could now maintain his dignity in this way. However, the servant who was supporting him knew best that he was trembling slightly. Wei Shi heard all the movements outside. Sure enough, men were all the same. When they made a mistake, they would only push it to the woman. So what if she seduced him? In the beginning, he was someone who had married a wife and had a child. He was not a young boy who was in love for the first time. She hooked her finger and he would come over. Truly clear and honest, knowing etiquette, justice, integrity and shame. Even a young boy would not hook up with his stepmother. Even if he would not reveal it, he would stay far away. Did he really think that she would casually pick someone to make a move on? A straight body was not afraid of a crooked shadow. The root was rotten. Pretending to be a gentleman, it made people feel disgusted. Wei Shi frowned. So far she had not seen the main character. Although the biggest suspect was Jin Qinhuang, it was still a suspicion. She did not have any conclusive evidence. She was like a mouse under his cat's paw. He gently fiddled with it and it could make you tumble, but you could not even see his true appearance. This kind of powerlessness was really unprecedented. Wan Ruizhong felt that someone was looking at him as a joke. How could Wei Shi not have this kind of feeling? 10 or 20 years of hard work was wasted just like that. She was not reconciled. No matter how unwilling she was just a turtle in a jar, a prisoner. Wan Ruizhong ordered people to lock the courtyard door and pinched the key himself. The people outside were all Wei Shi's personal servants. These people clearly knew what Wei Shi was doing, but they all kept their mouths shut. It could be seen that Wei Shi's imperial methods were very effective. Thinking about it again, the entire Wan family's inner courtyard was managed by her without a drop of water leaking out. If she wanted to do something to him, just thinking about it made him shudder. However, this kind of matter of adultery with her stepson, she would not dare to let the whole residence know. He ordered his servant to call the eldest daughter-in-law. Looking at the dispirited face of his daughter-in-law, who was punished because of the previous separation of the family. Did she or did they know something that caused such a strong reaction? Flog this group of lowly servants to death. From now on, Wan family will be under your control. https://118007/6653231. Chapter 205. Wan Ruizhong's gaze was heavy, but he didn't explain. In this situation, even if he knew that the other party was well aware, he couldn't expose it and embarrass himself. Many times people were like this. They needed to pretend to be peaceful. Madame Wan didn't laugh, but it was clear from her eyebrows that her heart had turned bright. She lowered her head and respectfully accepted the order. Even though she knew that her father-in-law wanted to use her to deal with this matter, it was necessary to deal with it well. If not, she might have to bear all the consequences. However, she did not mind being able to deal with that bitch openly. She had been looking forward to this day for far too long. However, when Wan Ruizhong saw her expression, his heart became gloomier. He wasn't sure if his eldest son was also involved. Did the eldest daughter-in-law's hatred for Wei originated from this? But there was no way to investigate this matter. If he really found out, he was afraid that he would really collapse. He would rather lie to himself. The eldest daughter-in-law was just jealous that Wei had always been in power. And according to Wei's age, she probably wouldn't be able to turn things around for the rest of her life. Wan Ruizhong left in a huff, and his two evil sons still followed behind him with pale faces. Madame Wan looked at her two younger brothers-in-law. She actually didn't quite understand what that lewd woman Wei Shi had given them. Even if she gave them young and beautiful concubines, they still couldn't be tied down. Although the servants of the Ruan family all obeyed Wei's words, the Ruan family was so big that there were always people she couldn't control. For example, these daughters-in-law. It was good enough that she could arrange a few people. Moreover, for a woman to have a foothold in the backyard, a man's trust was the foundation. No matter how powerful Wei was in the Ruan family, other than her own group of die-hard followers, There was a prerequisite for others to revere her. Now the head of the family, Juan Ruiz Hong, wanted to deal with her. Her people were all under his control. Compared to those people she didn't want to do, who would be stupid enough to go against the head of the family for her? Most importantly, there were quite a few people in the courtyard who weren't under Madame Wei's watch all year round. They didn't have her trust and naturally didn't have the heart to win them over. They didn't feel the generosity and benevolence of their mistress. Now weren't they the best executioners under Madame Ruan's command? The group of people who were the guards of the courtyard were now missing. When they didn't know about Madame Wei's trump card, Madame Ruan didn't feel anything wrong at all. There were only a dozen people who served her closely. In essence, they were all weak people. There was no need to worry about them playing any tricks. Madame Ruan looked down at this group of people. Because of Madame Wei, they seemed to be well behaved on the surface, but they did a lot of tricks in the dark. Like master, like servant. It was not an exaggeration to use this saying on them. Now they were kneeling in front of her, kowtowing and begging for mercy. The more miserable these people were, the more carefree she felt. She didn't call for the execution immediately. On one hand, she wanted to see the appearance of these bullies begging. On the other hand, she wanted to wait for a person. A person called Ruan Fengfei, who was pampered in the Ruan family. Nominally, she was a sister-in-law. In reality, who knew if she was a daughter, a niece, or an unrelated person? Unfortunately, after waiting for about a quarter of an hour, she didn't see anyone. She was probably avoiding suspicion. Beat them. All of them were gagged. Under normal circumstances, there would be varying degrees of discomfort when seeing blood. However, when these people were your big enemies, this discomfort would turn into pleasure. It was best to beat these people's bones, flesh, and blood into a ball. Madame Ruan looked at these people attentively. One by one, their faces twisted and they struggled in pain. Then they breathed their last. Under her 2 words, continue, they became unrecognizable. At first they were quiet. Then they slowly smiled. In the end they smiled and smiled, but tears fell. It was like madness. She was already frightened by the pile of dead people. Her hands and feet went soft. She was even more worried that she would have nightmares for half a month. Madam, it's all in the past. A mother beside the woman comforted her in a low voice with a pale face. Madame Ruan gradually restrained her emotions. Yes, it was all in the past. She avenged her child who died in vain. She glanced at the closed courtyard door. It's a pity. It was a pity that she couldn't let this bitch end up in the same way. If she could, Madame Ruan wanted to bury her with her own hands. In the end, family scandals shouldn't be aired in public. Even if Master hates her at this moment for the sake of face, he won't attack her at this time. He also won't let Madame do it. The mother still said in a low voice. I know. I'm just worried that a long night will cause trouble. That's impossible, right? Master said that he caught her personally. How can he forgive her? Any man wouldn't be able to stand this kind of thing. But mother, you also know how powerful this bitch is. Sometimes she's evil and bewitching. It even makes people suspect that she's not human. If she couldn't see her die with her own eyes, the woman's heart would never be completely calm. The mother also felt evil. She kept praying in her heart. Although she said that, Madame Ruan made up a reason to kill so many people. Then she went to report to Juan Ruiz Hong. The so-called reasons were all for the people outside to hear. Everyone knew that it was most likely false. It was just an excuse that they used to cover up their shame. Just like Emperor Lu Qing in the past. He was clearly the one who killed the imperial noble consort, but he said that the imperial noble consort died of blood loss during childbirth. The death of the imperial noble consort made him furious and killed all the servants. It was so clumsy. However, he was the emperor. No one dared to say anything about the excuse he used. Other people were different. They could imagine 100 truths in their minds. Madame Ruan knew what the situation was, but she didn't care at all. Could her life be worse than before? Now the Ruan family was surrounded by rumors. Everything was caused by that bitch's bitch. When the mother and daughter disappeared, the rumors would fade over time. When everyone forgot about it, it would get better. Although her heart wasn't completely calm, it was much more relaxed. Her 2 uncles knelt on the stone road under the hot sun. She didn't even lift her eyelids. It wasn't just these 2 people who should be kneeling here. However, there were some things that her father-in-law would never allow to be exposed. Madame Ruan reported the matter unhurriedly and stood obediently with her eyes lowered. Juan Ruizhong just rested for a while. He wanted to take a good rest. However, this body wasn't something he could do whatever he wanted. His current situation was really beyond his ability. She glanced at her daughter-in-law. In the past, because of the difference between men and women, even a daughter-in-law wouldn't easily look at them. Perhaps because of this, she repeatedly missed the opportunity to discover some truths. She was indeed older than Madame Wei, but she looked like she was 20 years older than Madame Wei. Why did she endure for so long without revealing it? If she had revealed it earlier, he wouldn't have been so miserably deceived by Madame Wei. Thinking of this, anger rose from his heart again. He took 2 deep breaths. He repeatedly warned himself not to be angry. Don't be angry. If he died. Occasionally he felt that it would be better if he died like this. It was shameful to live. However, if he died he might be directly drowned in dirty water. Therefore, no matter what, he had to deal with the matter cleanly. Madame Juan didn't know his thoughts. Otherwise she would have mocked him. Madame Wei hid it too well. She didn't have any conclusive evidence to use against her. Many things were deliberately revealed to her. It was specious. In addition, she had always been generous with money and never treated others harshly. If she revealed it, would she end up well? She still had a child and a maternal family. It wasn't worth it to fight to the death. I'm not worried when you do things. Right now the family is in a mess. You should put in more effort. He paused. If you can't handle it, ask your sisters-in-law to help you. I'm not worried when you do things. This was Madame Wei's patent. Hearing these words now, it was not just a little disgusting. What did he mean by asking his sisters-in-law to help if she couldn't handle it? He was worried that she would monopolize the power and become the second Madame Wei. No matter what she thought in her heart, she didn't show it at all. Right now, she really didn't have much interest in the power of this family. Father-in-law, please don't worry. It's just that this daughter-in-law sees that you don't seem to be well. Are you tired because of the political affairs? You have to take care of yourself. She found an excuse for him and built a ladder. Naturally, he went along with it. I'm indeed busy with political affairs. I need to rest in the afternoon. If someone, forget it, you can go. Yes. Juan Ruizhong leaned on the couch drowsily, but it was really difficult to sleep soundly. Just at this time Juan Fengfei came to see him. Because he had a daughter when he was old, he pampered and doted on her like a precious treasure. He gave her the best of everything. Because of her excellence, he pampered her even more. Even if she was particularly stubborn towards Jin Qinhuang, he still indulged her. Because of her, the whole family was not at peace. He also didn't harshly criticize her. But the result was he didn't even know whose child she was. Scram, make her scram for me. If she dares to take half a step out of the courtyard, immediately beat her to death. This lowly child was the most powerful evidence of that slut wearing a green hat on his head. It was his biggest stain. Juan Ruizhong was really thinking about how to make her directly die. Juan Fengfei heard Juan Ruizhong's words. Although she didn't care about this father anymore, but for her own sake she was still willing to put down her status and be a filial daughter. But now it seemed that it wasn't a question of whether she wanted to please him or not, but rather whether he would let her continue to live. Even if her heart was higher than the sky, but without the support of the corresponding power, in the end, her life could only be as thin as paper. Right now she was trapped everywhere and hit a wall everywhere. If this incompetent father abandoned her, what else could she do? At this moment Juan Fengfei couldn't help but tremble with fear. What did her mother do? Not only was she grounded, the people around her were all beaten to death, and now she was implicated. According to her father's current state, she was afraid that saying a few soft words and crying and begging would not be effective. After standing for a moment, she prepared to go back first. Along the way, the servants were evading her and pointing fingers. Her face was unmoved, but her eyes were filled with darkness. After hearing about Juan Fengfei's treatment, Madame Juan, who was busy reorganizing, called people and even brought her unmarried children, who were also in trouble because of Juan Fengfei's marriage, directly to Juan Fengfei's courtyard. Didn't you envy her for having countless good things in the past? Now as long as you like it, you can move it all back. Juan Fengfei suppressed her anger. Sister-in-law, what do you mean? What do I mean? Haven't you always been smart? Can't you understand such simple words? Then I'll make it clear to you. Right now I'm bringing people to snatch things. Move it for me. Even if the final dust had not settled, she no longer had so many scruples. At this point, if her father-in-law still let that bitch turn things around, it could only be said that he was not a man. As for her, she had already completely offended her, so she was no longer afraid of itching. You dare. Why wouldn't I dare? Right now, the one in charge of the family was this madam. It could be said that it was human nature to take advantage of the situation. Little aunt is so generous today, so I won't be polite, the young girl who followed her said with a smile. She rolled her eyes and directly barged into the room, quickly carrying out a jewelry box. Wan Fengfei took a look and saw that it was her favorite box. Naturally, it was filled with her favorite things. Basically, they were all very valuable. Without thinking, she wanted to snatch it back. Unfortunately, the girl's people rushed up and blocked her. As for her, after her eldest sister-in-law and the others came in, she shrank into a corner. She could not even get close to it. At first, the girl was a little scared. Seeing this scene, she slightly raised her chin and laughed. Little aunt ruined my marriage, so just treat it as compensation for me. Although I find it inconceivable that a disfigured and broken thing like you can be a prince's concubine, I don't envy you for serving an old man. I think you won't lack these things in the future. Wan Fengfei's eyes were red. Seeing this group of people begin to move her things, she gritted her teeth in hatred. She aimed at a nearby vase, rushed up, wrapped it up and smashed it on the ground. With a bang, it broke into pieces. Even if her things were smashed, she would not let others benefit from it. This movement shocked many people. Taking advantage of the short time they were stunned, Wan Fengfei smashed a few more treasures on the cabinet next to her. It was the kind that would completely break after being smashed. Madame Wan hurriedly stepped forward. He was not polite at all. She grabbed her hair and gave her a big slap. Wan Fengfei's body was out of control. She slammed into the cabinet and started bleeding. Unfortunately, she did not receive any pity. Come watch this money-losing and prodigal thing for me. Receiving the signal, two big and rough women rolled up their sleeves and came forward, carrying her to the side. Seeing her girl being bullied like this, a maid felt distressed. But as soon as she stood up, she was slapped back. The others did not dare to make a move. Wan Fengfei's hatred was monstrous at this time. Unfortunately, as soon as she made a move, she was pinched by the two women openly and secretly. How could a delicate girl like her resist? Madame Wan saw all of this. The things on this little bitch's body belong to whoever takes them off. When the two women heard this, their eyes lit up. Although Wan Fengfei did not have many things on her, they were all exquisite. They were rough laborers and only got a little bit of money every month. They would only get a little reward during the New Year and festivals. All of them added up to 20 or 30 taels of silver, which would make them smile from ear to ear. They could not earn as much money as Wan Fengfei's bracelet in their lifetime. Now it was a windfall from the sky. They were like two wolves pouncing on a little sheep. They were worried that others would take a share of the soup, so they acted quickly and ruthlessly. Wan Fengfei naturally suffered. Her hair was messy, her belt was torn off, her hands were red and swollen, and the pearl repair shoes on her feet were directly taken off. She looked like she had been bullied. The others wanted to go forward, but unfortunately the things had been divided up. They could only think of other things. However, their master did not say anything, so they did not dare to steal. They only hoped that their master could leak some through the cracks. That would be enough for them to be ecstatic. Madame Wan looked at Wan Fengfei with a smile. It was not bad that she did not see the miserable appearance of that bitch. Wan Fengfei met her gaze. There was no longer any suppression in her eyes, which made people feel frightened. She calmed down. You really are not a good thing. You really have the same virtue as your bitch mother. You are used to putting on an act. You will die a horrible death, Wan Fengfei said like a ghost. Madame Wan sneered. Then I will wait and see how you, a stray dog, will turn over. Mother, there are so many good things. It is not good for us to take them alone. Why don't we let the other brothers and sisters take them together? My daughter is a director. You can get someone to call them. As long as they are willing, they will all come. Therefore, not long after, more people joined the ranks of dividing the things. Among them, most of them were on good terms with Wan Fengfei. However, it was hard to find one who was wholeheartedly loyal to her. Wan Fengfei was used to being surrounded by stars and was used to pretending. From time to time, she would show a high and mighty attitude which would naturally hurt them. Over time, a seed had been planted in their hearts. When she was surrounded by rumors she could not leave the house, her marriage was ruined, her friends left one by one, and the culprit was her, Wan Fengfei. Naturally she would completely explode. Such a jinx, it would not be too much to skin her alive. Perhaps there were one or two who were sincerely sad and wanted to defend her. However, before they could say anything, they were suppressed by the others who found the spearhead. Human nature was selfish. No one wanted to be ostracized by everyone because of her. They could only keep silent. However, in Wan Fengfei's eyes, they were a group of ungrateful wolves. He was so good to them. Sure enough, there was no good thing in this world. Everything that could be moved was moved away, including the clothes. Only a few pieces were left for her. Her clothes were all brand new and had only been bought not long ago. On Wan Fengfei's body, other than some special ones, she could not find any clothes that she had worn in the first year. After it was completely quiet, she realized that all the people who served her had also been called away. The courtyard of the temporary residence was not as big as the residence in the capital. However, Wan Fengfei's courtyard was not small. Now it was empty. Wan Fengfei shrank in the same place for a long time. Her head leaned back and her eyes were a little empty. Looking at the empty house, she did not seem to understand how it ended up like this. She was humiliated outside, but her position at home was not shaken. How did it change in the blink of an eye? Those so-called nephews and nieces were like kittens in front of her. When she was happy she would tease them and they would meow obediently. Now they dared to step on her head and wave their claws at her. Outside she was not as strong as others. She could adjust her mentality, endure the humiliation and find an opportunity to take revenge. However, these people at home were like ants in her eyes. Now they were collectively opposing her. The bigger the difference, the more resentful it was in her heart. She got up and rushed out. However, when she reached the entrance of the courtyard, she realized that the door had been locked from the outside. She smashed the door and shouted for her to get out. "Young lady, calm down. Master said that if you take half a step out of the courtyard, you will be beaten to death. The first madam is doing this for your own good. She is just worried that you will be impulsive and lose your life. It is not worth it." Outside, an old woman was eating melon seeds while persuading her. In exchange, Wan Fengfei cursed. No matter what Wan Fengfei's mentality was, with her education she had never scolded anyone. Perhaps it should be said that she was smart. The skill of scolding people was self-taught. She was not like a shrew. However, her viciousness and insidiousness were really unmatched by ordinary people. Everyone who heard it was speechless. The first madam was right. It was true that one could know a person for a long time without understanding their heart. The most vicious person in the Ruan family was the kindest person in the past. Because Ruan Ruizhong had not said how to deal with it, Madame Ruan did not say anything when she heard the servant's report. She was a filial daughter-in-law. Now that her father-in-law was resting, she naturally would not bother him with such a small matter. As for those who took the things, they were very nervous. They knew how much their grandfather loved their aunt. Now he was angry, but what if he regretted it? What would they do if he punished them later? However, the first Madame Ruan assured them that if anything really happened, she would bear the responsibility alone. As the saying goes, the law does not punish the majority. Their grandfather would never punish them. After lunch, Le Qingdi sent someone to take Wan Ruizhong's pulse and check his physical condition. After all, he was his right-hand man. Whether it was out of sincerity or just to save face, Le Qingdi sent someone to take Wan Ruizhong's pulse. The imperial physician took Wan Ruizhong's pulse, but his heart skipped a beat. Why was he angry and depressed at the same time? There were also signs of a stroke. No matter how he looked at it, it did not look good. What had happened? However, no matter what happened, it had nothing to do with him. It was fine as long as he did his duty. He wrote a prescription, gave a few words of advice and returned to report. Son, daughter-in-law, grandson, granddaughter-in-law, granddaughter and great-grandson. A large group of people surrounded him and carefully served him. Although it was not as comfortable as Madame Wei serving him, looking at this large family with so many children and grandchildren, his heart was more or less relieved. However, thinking of what that lewd woman Madame Wei said, not only did she touch his son, she even had her eyes on his grandson. That little bit of relief instantly shattered into pieces. He looked at his children and grandchildren suspiciously, as if he wanted to see if they had an affair with Madame Wei from time to time. However, no matter how he looked, they still had a respectful and humble appearance. "Get out, all of you, get out. The first Madame Wan originally wanted to take this opportunity to talk about Wan Fengfei and test Wan Ruizhong. However, seeing this scene, she swallowed the words back down. Because she heard that Wan Ruizhong did not sleep well, she added a sedative medicine to the prescription. After Wan Ruizhong drank the medicine, he became drowsy. He was basically in this state for the entire afternoon. No matter how chaotic and bloody the Wan family was, the Luo family was full of laughter and laughter. It was probably really rare to be so happy. It could be said that this was the only day in their lives. They did not leave after lunch and continued to play. Even if they were covered in sweat, their usual chastity and virtuous appearance was completely gone. At most, they would make fun of each other. Not to mention, even if they were sworn enemies, they didn't seem to want to fight to the death at this time. It was not until the middle of the afternoon, when it was almost dusk, that someone began to say goodbye. Although they were reluctant to leave, it was indeed not early. It should be known that the previous banquets basically ended after lunch. Jingwan asked someone to bring water. Although it was not impossible to take a bath at this time, it was still possible to tidy up their appearance. At least when they went out, others would not be able to see anything wrong with their appearance. After tidying up, each and every one of them became a graceful noble lady. Some of them looked at each other and revealed a tacit smile. After sending off the last guest, Jingwan was also able to take a break. Although it was not very tiring, as the host she had to look for this and that and accompany almost all of them. This was the first time this kind of situation had happened. Besides being at ease, she was also a little uncomfortable. She arranged for a bath early and let Mama Gong relax her muscles and bones. She felt that she was full of energy again. This banquet, it's better to hold less of it in the future. Mama Gong heard this and smiled lightly. That's what young lady did. Look at the banquets of other families, they are not as busy as young lady. This should be considered the first banquet Jingwan hosted after coming to the capital. It was obviously very successful. Actually, I had a lot of fun myself. Alas, the more I live, the more backward I am. Young lady, what are you talking about? You should be at the age to have fun. Isn't that so? I'm carefree all day and basically have nothing to do. Naturally, I'll have fun. Mama, I didn't have an afternoon nap today, so I'm a little sleepy. I'll take a nap now. Wake me up 15 minutes before dinner. As Jingwan spoke, she let out a small yawn. Her half-closed eyes overflowed with some physiological tears. Her pair of eyes were like limpid autumn waters and were especially seductive. Jingwan fell asleep very quickly. Mama Gong gently adjusted her sleeping position. If she slept with her arms pressed down, it would be uncomfortable for her to sleep for a long time. Mama Gong then covered her with a thin silk blanket before leaving. After that, Qingzhu came in with a round fan and fanned Jingwan unhurriedly. She was not in a hurry and made sure that there was a trace of cool breeze. The maidservant woke her up before dinner and asked her to drink some water to wake her up. After that, she would be fine after dinner. During this time, Sun Yijia came by once, but seeing that she was sleeping, she did not disturb her. After that, Jingwan did the same as usual. On the other hand, Luo Peishan began to be busy again because of the matters in the south. It seemed that he would not be able to sleep until later. Because they had been eating together recently, Jingwan overheard him talking about water conservancy. Jingwan did not know much about it. If she really wanted to talk about something, it would probably be about emergency rescue and post-disaster resettlement. She could still talk on paper based on the things she learned in her previous life. However, as far as she knew, the Qi Yuan dynasty, or to be more precise, the previous dynasty, had a set of perfect methods to deal with floods. Jingwan never underestimated the wisdom of these people. However, she could look back at it carefully. After all, it was more than thousands of years of accumulation. She should be able to list out some useful things. With regards to Li Hongyuan's second visit, Jingwan only raised her eyes to look at him, then closed them again and went back to sleep. Li Hongyuan's main purpose of coming tonight was to look for Luo Peishan. However, since he was already in the Luo family's territory, how could he not come to see Jingwan? He hugged her, kissed her and rubbed her ears. He guessed that Luo Peishan had finished reading the things he wrote and thoroughly understood it. I have something to do tonight, so I won't accompany you. As if I want to be with you. Jingwan muttered in a low voice. Li Hongyuan smiled and kissed her forehead. Then I will go first. Jingwan watched him go out the door. In fact, her heart was still very slippery. No matter what, it was better to say something than not to say anything at all. She felt that everything she did was right and proper. Jingwan wouldn't let her imagination run wild now, but his attitude at least showed his respect. Luo Peishan was still carefully looking through the things Li Hongyuan wrote. His heart was full of admiration. Jin Qinhuang really wasn't simple. The things that the emperor didn't know about he was clear about. And the things that everyone was still thinking about he had already thought about, all aspects clearly organized, and the ideas were all implemented. Just as he was pondering over some places that could be added in some details, he inadvertently looked up and saw Li Hongyuan walk in. Just like the last time, he came in so quietly. Luo Peishan silently cursed. A dignified Qinhuang being the gentleman on the beam, he didn't have the least bit of embarrassment. But since he wanted to come over, why did he need to let someone show him the booklet in advance? At this time, what could he be busy with? However, if he knew that Li Hongyuan took advantage of this time to break into his good granddaughter's room, who knows what kind of expression he would have. He got up and turned around from behind the desk. Greetings to Wang Ye. Dispense with the formalities. Li Hongyuan sat down at the side. Luo Darren has finished reading. What do you think? Is there anything you need to add? This was an old man. It wasn't like he was close to Wan, so naturally he did business according to the rules and didn't say anything superfluous. Facing proper business, Luo Peishan also didn't hesitate and directly expressed his own opinions and views. The two people started to discuss this matter. As for the matter of serving tea and water, an Yi took over. As for Luo Peishan's manservant, he was still a little dazed because of Jin Qinhuang's visit in the middle of the night. It must be said that the last time Li Hongyuan visited Luo Peishan in the middle of the night, he directly made him faint. Because Li Hongyuan's writing was very comprehensive and detailed, there were very few places that needed to be added. Therefore, the discussion didn't take long, less than an hour. Luo Peishan's appreciation for Li Hongyuan rose to admiration. With this ability, if the other princes were to be pinched together, they would be far from being able to catch up. The way he handled matters was shrewd and ruthless, skillful, as if the universe was in his grasp. To say something disrespectful, even Luqing Emperor was far inferior. If this kind of person failed in the struggle for the throne, it simply didn't make sense. However, thinking of his reputation on the surface, it can be imagined how deeply this person hid. Li Hongyuan took a sip of tea. I will have to trouble Luo Darren with the rest. Luo Peishan pointed at the memorial. Wang Ye didn't think of submitting it yourself? Letting this official monopolize such a big merit? Li Hongyuan glanced at him. What merit does Ben Wang need? That's true. This world belongs to His Highness, so why would he care about this little bit of fame? Moreover, when His Highness handed over the memorial, His Majesty's first reaction would probably be to question whose credit His Highness had stolen. Then he would suspect His Highness's intentions. He wouldn't even think that his own son actually had this ability. Li Hongyuan declined to comment. He never wanted something like a false reputation. Rising, Ben Wang will take his leave. Luo Peishan hurriedly followed suit, respectfully sending off Wang Ye. When the study was quiet again, Luo Peishan's gaze once again fell on the memorial. After a moment he sat down, opened the memorial that had been edited and began to transcribe it. Tomorrow he would present it to the emperor. His servant came in to refill his tea. Forget everything that happened tonight. Luo Peishan didn't raise his head, nor did his hands stop moving, but the servant understood and hurriedly responded. This matter wasn't a joke. Li Hongyuan went to the Ruan residence again. Perhaps he had a premonition, but he didn't rest. At the same time, he didn't leave anyone to serve him. The servants only thought that he had a knot in his heart and didn't say anything. After he got angry, they didn't dare to stay. Seeing Li Hongyuan appear, Wan Ruizhong was surprised. However, in his heart he felt that it was somewhat within his expectations. Greetings to Wang Ye. Li Hongyuan calmly sat down, then casually said, You may rise. After that, Li Hongyuan didn't speak and Wan Ruizhong stood with his hands hanging down. Sit down. If you continue like this, people who don't know will think that Ben Wang is cold-blooded, punishing a frail old man to stand. Many thanks to Wang Ye. Wan Ruizhong ignored the other content in his words. Doesn't the Grand Secretary want to say something to Ben Wang? Li Hongyuan supported his head with one hand with a bit of leisure and laziness. Wan Ruizhong finally raised his head to look at him. I can only say that Wang Ye is truly amazing, deceiving everyone. In reality, before, he had a lot to say about the mastermind behind this. The most important point was, since he knew about these things, why didn't he tell him in private? Why did he have to make the Ruan residence like this? Did Ruan Ruizhong offend him? That's right, he already thought that all of this might be the person Wei Shi spoke of. Seeing Li Hongyuan, he didn't ask anything. According to this person's temperament and style of doing things, he might not tell you even if you asked. Even if he did, the answer might be, I'm happy. Master, the person has been brought over. And Yi's voice sounded at the door. Soon after, Wei Shi, who was dressed in an exceptionally flirtatious and enchanting manner, walked in. That was an attire that Ruan Ruizhong had never seen before. After a moment of amazement, her face was completely black like the bottom of a pot. Not only because after everything was torn apart she became unscrupulous, but also because her eyes were staring straight at Jin Qinhuang. Wei Shi didn't even give Ruan Ruizhong a glance as she seductively greeted Li Hongyuan. As expected, it is Wang Ye. To speak of Wang Ye's methods, Qinfu admires Wang Ye from the bottom of her heart. Li Hongyuan looked at her lightly. Your ability isn't that great to be so easily ruined. Ben Wang originally thought that he would need to spend more energy. Wei Shi's deep feelings stiffened, then she smiled flirtatiously. Wang Ye is in the dark, Qinfu is in the light. Wang Ye knows Qinfu very well, Qinfu knows nothing about Wang Ye. Wang Ye acted suddenly, Qinfu was naturally caught unprepared. If there were precautions, the result might not be like this. https://11/11807/6653235. Chapter 206. You've been hiding in the capital for 10 to 20 years, so you should have understood the various powers, but you don't know anything about this prince. This isn't the first time something has happened to Ruan Fengfei. You should know that as Ruan Fengfei's biggest backer, how could this prince let you go? You didn't have enough preparation, but you said that this prince made a sudden move. Is this your ability? Madame Wei's face turned green and white for a moment. But she quickly smiled again. It's all because this subject's skills are inferior. Now that I've fallen into the prince's hands, I'll naturally be at his disposal. As she spoke, she winked at Li Hongyuan. Ruan Ruizhong was so angry that his veins were popping. No matter what, she was still his wife, but she was actually seducing another man in front of him. However, after hearing their conversation, he knew that this cheap woman had another identity, so he could only suppress his anger. Madame Wei continued, Can this subject ask 2 questions, Prince? When did Prince notice this subject's wife? Why did you notice this subject's wife? It's reasonable to say that as a woman of the inner residence, you shouldn't be treated differently by Prince. You raised such a good daughter. Is it strange that this prince noticed you? His eyes still didn't have the slightest emotion. Belittling someone might hurt, but to have nothing and be completely disregarded was even more uncomfortable for some people. The more arrogant an arrogant one was, the easier it was to become this kind of person. Madame Wei happened to be this kind of person, but she restrained herself very well so outsiders couldn't see it. Madame Wei's lips moved. Indeed, her daughter had targeted this person from the beginning. Because of this person she would implicate herself. What a simple connection. At that time she still doted on Ruan Fengfei. Since her daughter had taken a fancy to him, then no matter who the other party was, it was the other party's honor. She had never given up on investigating the princes, especially after he was bestowed the title of prince. However, Li Hongyuan hid too deeply and was too cautious in doing things. He didn't reveal any clues, so naturally she didn't have the chance to find any clues. 1 year, 2 years, 4 years later, the results of the investigation on Li Hongyuan remained the same. After all, she had limited energy and manpower, so she withdrew her investigation on Li Hongyuan and allowed her daughter to get close to him. You've been investigating this prince for 4 years. If it wasn't for Ruan Fengfei, you probably would have been able to find some clues. Before the age of 16, Li Hongyuan had been in the palace. At that time, Madame Wei had already taken root in the palace. Even if she had memories of her previous life, she had too little to do with Madame Wei. For no reason, Li Hongyuan would not easily suspect her. If they knew that Li Hongyuan was not a good-for-nothing, but a man-eating ferocious beast that was hibernating in the dark, not to mention letting Ruan Fengfei get close, they would definitely make her stay far away. After all, Any young lady did not need a reason to stay away from the king of hell. Then again, Wan Fengfei had fallen in love with Li Hongyuan when she was young. She allowed her to get close to him as a means to test him. If she really had that ambition, how could she not be tempted in the face of the power of the cabinet chief? Therefore, this was actually an unsolvable situation. The Wei clan had lost miserably because of a single move. Prince is wise and mighty. This subject is ashamed of her inferiority. Speaking of which, to deal with a person like this subject, the sooner you make your move, the better. However, Prince has delayed for a few years. Why is that? It was really tiring to deal with people who did not act according to common sense. Because your daughter is very useful and your threat is within a controllable range. This prince does not mind keeping valuable things. Would Li Hongyuan tell her? Naturally not. Other people were not qualified to know about Jingwan's matters. Speaking of which, Wan Fengfei had told her about Jingwan's matters, but she did not believe it at all and had long thrown it to the back of her mind. Now she did not connect it at all. Other than accidentally, who would think of this kind of truth? Even if Wan Fengfei had guessed it and Li Hongyuan had personally admitted it, would she really believe it? Most likely, she would think that Li Hongyuan was deliberately angering her. Rational people would pay attention to evidence and reason. Luo Peishan and old Madame Luo easily believed Li Hongyuan's words because they were emotional, and thought that Jingwan could be fancied by anyone. Seeing that Li Hongyuan did not continue to speak, the Wei clan maintained her seductive attitude. Then now, how does Prince plan to deal with this subject? This subject has heard that there is a mother and daughter in Prince's courtyard in the capital. Although she was defeated, she still admires Prince. I don't know if she would have the honor to serve Prince. She will definitely let Prince experience what is called happiness in the world. Her body seemed to be slightly rubbing and twisting slightly. She even stuck out her tongue and licked her red lips. It was extremely seductive. Wei clan had learned the art of seduction. Of course, it was just some small movements of her body and some external small things such as aphrodisiac and the like, that made people feel that she was more attractive than ordinary people. In addition, she had learned the art of sleeping. Generally, the men who touched her always felt that they could be happier with her than with other women. Therefore, without a bit of willpower, it was really difficult to get rid of her. Wan Ruizhong's sons fell for her probably because of this reason. Coupled with the taboo against morality, it made them who had released their hearts even more unable to give up. Wei clan was a person with a strong desire. She had never wronged herself. When Wan Ruizhong couldn't satisfy her, it was natural for her to have an affair. The reason why she didn't use similar methods on Wan Ruizhong was that she was worried that he was a little old. If she used too much of his body, he would die young. Then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. After all, Wan Ruizhong had a promising future. When she first married him, he had the possibility of becoming the cabinet chief. Such a person could be squeezed out a lot of useful things. However, this man was very conceited. She could achieve her goal without using seduction to keep him. Therefore, in front of him, she was happy to be a good wife and mother. She was now seducing Li Hongyuan. She was confident that as long as she pulled Li Hongyuan to bed, not only could she save her life, but she could also get something that she didn't even dare to think about before. At Wan Ruizhong's age, he basically didn't have any desire, so Wei clan's seduction wouldn't work on him. However, they were still husband and wife in name. She dared to be so brazen and not put him in her eyes. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore and slammed the table. "Slut, you have big guts." At this time, she still called herself this official's wife. Was she trying to make him feel disgusted? "Your Highness, you also saw it. This woman is so wanton and dirty. If your Highness touches her, wouldn't you dirty yourself? This official will have someone drown her right now to prevent her from harming others." Wei clan didn't take Wan Ruizhong seriously at all. Her attention was always on Li Hongyuan. Step by step she approached. The closer she got, the more excited she became. Such a handsome, strong and capable man aroused her unprecedented desire to conquer. It was a drug that only worked on men, but it seemed to have affected her. At this moment, Madame Wei really looked like a bitch in heat. Luo Peishan was so angry that he almost vomited blood. No matter what, he couldn't let this lewd woman enter Jin Qinhuang's eyes. Otherwise, according to Jin Qinhuang's usual style, he wouldn't be able to clean up this woman who brought him extraordinary shame and humiliation. If he had known earlier, he would have killed her from the start. He hurriedly stepped forward and tried to pull away the woman's carriage that was already close to Jin Qinhuang. Faster than words could tell, Li Hongyuan, who was sitting still, suddenly kicked. First it was her calf. Taking advantage of her body falling forward uncontrollably, he kicked straight for her heart without mercy. Wei Clan, whose hand had already reached out to her, flew backwards and fell to the ground. Wei Clan spat out a mouthful of blood. She felt that her lungs seemed to have shifted. Wei Clan's martial arts weren't weak, but in the end she was restricted by her identity. She couldn't brazenly practice martial arts. In this matter, if she didn't advance, she would fall back. Because compared to Li Hongyuan, she was still lacking a lot. It was difficult to avoid. Wan Ruizhong was stunned on the spot. Things happened in a flash. He didn't seem to have reacted to what had happened, and the scene had already become like this. He looked at the woman who was vomiting blood on the ground and then looked at Li Hongyuan, who didn't seem to have done anything. Suddenly he flung his sleeves and sat back down. When he cared about you, he would hold you like a pearl or a treasure. When he hated you, the more miserable you were, the more delightful it was to watch. When Wan Ruizhong married her, he was already over 50 years old. He had already passed the age of admiring someone. Therefore Wan Ruizhong cared more about other things than love. As a result, it was very easy to harden his heart. Wei Clan's chest was burning with pain, but she stubbornly looked at Li Hongyuan. Just now he kept looking at her. She thought that he was just like other men. As long as she used a little trick, she could easily make him fall in love with her. But now, after looking carefully, she found that his gaze was frighteningly clear. There wasn't the slightest bit of desire. It could be seen that the medicine she prepared didn't work. He looked at her like he was looking at a clown. Her actions in his eyes were like listening to a funny joke. Wei Clan's gaze lowered. She couldn't help but cough twice, which made her heart feel even more uncomfortable. When she raised her head again, her gaze was even more heated. It was a naked desire to conquer. As expected of the man who secretly controls the universe. How can I use ordinary methods to deal with you? That's simply an insult to you. Wan Fengfei is indeed your child. You seduced another man in front of your husband. Wan Fengfei, as an unmarried woman, dared to undress and recommend herself to a man. It's simply the brothel's loss that she didn't live in it. Before she was disfigured, this prince didn't even look at her. Someone like you, huh? Wei Clan's madam didn't care at all as she wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. In terms of serving men, even if there were 10 of them, they still wouldn't be able to compare to this subject's hands and mouth, let alone other things. However, Fengfei admires you. Those in the know all thought that Fengfei was blind, but it turns out that her taste is very good. Whether it was derogatory or complimentary, Li Hongyuan's emotions didn't fluctuate at all. Li Hongyuan turned to look at Wan Ruizhong and said with interest, "Did the Grand Secretary suffer 8 lifetimes of bad luck to meet this mother and daughter pair? Being played in circles and deceived so miserably, what thoughts do you have? This prince originally thought that when you learned the truth you would probably die. Looking at your current situation, it seems that your endurance isn't bad." Wan Ruizhong's face was ashen. Even if he knew that Li Hongyuan wasn't good for nothing, he still couldn't change his opinion of him. He was too sinister, always rubbing salt on other people's wounds, but he couldn't do anything to him. How exactly does Wang Yi want to deal with this woman, and who exactly is she? Ha, a woman who shares a bed with you, you're asking this prince who she is. Wan Ruizhong felt like a fishbone was stuck in his throat. After a while he struggled to open his mouth. This subject is ignorant. Wang Yi, please do not be stingy with your guidance. For Wan Ruizhong to admit that he was ignorant, it still required a bit of courage. At the very least, it wasn't easy to cross that hurdle in his heart. But thinking about his current situation, it seemed that there was nothing he couldn't admit. Since the Grand Secretary is so sincere, this prince naturally won't be stingy. Bring it in. An E came in from outside and handed a flat box with a lock to Wan Ruizhong. Right now, Wan Ruizhong didn't have much leeway to think. Regardless of whether the things inside were something he could see or not, Weisher was now a thorn in his flesh. If he didn't get rid of it, he wouldn't be happy. If Jin Qinhuang didn't personally tell him, even if he saw these things, it was possible for Jin Qinhuang to hold them tightly in the palm of his hand. He wouldn't turn back. The key was on top. Wan Ruizhong took some time to open it because his hands were trembling. Not only was there a physical problem, there was also a psychological factor. Even if he didn't turn back, he was worried that he would be consigned to eternal damnation. Juan Ruiz Hong took out the things inside. It was a stack of letters. Juan Ruiz Hong started to read from the first one. There were more and less contents. Juan Ruiz Hong read faster and faster, and his hands trembled faster and faster. After reading less than half, he couldn't read anymore. His hands loosened and the things scattered on the ground. The family is unfortunate, the family is unfortunate, ah. Juan Ruiz Hong's expression was dejected, and then tears flowed down his old face. Anne Weisher, who was lying on the ground and couldn't get up, naturally saw part of the contents of the letters. Her pupils shrunk and she couldn't help but clench her fists. Because the letters were all the same, she was able to determine at first glance that these were all copies and not originals. But her basis was only the letters. It could be seen that whether it was the handwriting or the special symbols and seals, they were all exactly the same. But just this alone was enough to make her heart jump. She knew that Jin Qinhuang had a lot of her things, but in her view, there shouldn't be anything wrong with the information that she sent out. Now it seemed that what was called nothing wrong, it was obviously something that was extremely wrong. She sent it out, but it was all under the eyes of others. The reason why there was no mistake was because the other party didn't stop her. Crawling forward on her stomach, she pulled open the letter. Mainly looking at the date on it, the earliest was more than 4 years ago. It was about the time when Wan Fengfei dealt with Li Hongyuan's fiancé. Wang Ye's method is good. He sent out the information through different channels. At the beginning it wasn't all intercepted. This situation lasted for about 3 months. With regards to Weisher's praise, Li Hongyuan seemed to be a little dissatisfied with his own results. Weisher coughed twice. No matter what kind of Jin Qinhuang was, this infuriating nature still didn't change. The Yuan family wasn't an aristocratic family. In terms of background, perhaps it couldn't be compared to the Luo family. But they had served the country since the founding of Qiyuan. When it came to Juan Ruiz Hong, it could be said that they had reached their peak. The Yuan family was loyal to the emperor and loved the country. Juan Ruiz Hong took the country as his own responsibility. Who knew how many times the people who slept with him had made him wear a green hat? His daughter wasn't his own. These matters, in the present, were already insignificant. He slid down to kneel on the ground. Wang Ye, this official is guilty. This official is guilty and deserves 10,000 deaths. You want to ask for forgiveness, but the target shouldn't be Ben Wang. Juan Ruizhong's body stiffened slightly. This official is willing to serve Wang Ye like a dog and horse. Asking Wang Ye to give me a way out. More than half of the information on those letters had passed through his hands. Although they had been stolen by Weisher, Weisher was his legal wife. They had shared the same bed for 2 years. If he said that he knew nothing about her actions, not to mention outsiders, he would not believe it. In other people's shoes, he would not believe it either. Once this matter was exposed, he wouldn't be able to escape the crime of treason with the enemy. That was a great crime that involved the confiscation of his property and the extermination of his family. Therefore, his personal honor and disgrace were really not worth mentioning. After the heaviest blow, Juan Ruiz Hong became abnormally clear-headed. His muddled brain started to work again. The current situation absolutely didn't allow him to be unable to recover. If he didn't think of a way to reverse the situation, he would be the biggest sinner of the Yuan family. In the future, when he went underground, what would he use to face his ancestors? No matter how stupid he was, he should know the true face of this Jin Qinhuang. He had long known about the matter but concealed it. He knew the whole story from beginning to end. Then everything still had room to maneuver. From beginning to end, he was neutral and unwilling to take sides because he didn't really think highly of that prince. Now he only knew the tip of the iceberg of Jin Qinhuang's unknown side, but it let him see the potential of ascending to the throne. In addition, he had grasped his own fatal weakness. The right time, the right place, and the right people were all present. Then there was nothing to assist him. Juan Ruiz Hong, Ben Wang acknowledges your ability. But someone like you who is about to lie in the coffin, who knows when you will really lie in the coffin? Is it worth the lives of the entire Yuan family? There are so many capable people with lofty ideals in the world. Juan Ruiz Hong was silent. He knew that what Li Hongyuan said was true. Not to mention others, even among the officials in the court, there were many who secretly pledged their allegiance to him and worked for him. Other people aside, his recent archenemy Luo Peishan was certainly already helping him. Jin Qinhuang was his future grandson-in-law. Helping him was a matter of course. The lives of this official's entire family in Wang Ye's eyes are like ants. But to this official, it is as important as 10,000 caddies, even more important than life. Wang Ye is currently in a period of dormancy. Rather than borrowing other people's hands to report this matter to His Majesty, it is better to be magnanimous and let off a group of ants. This official will not hesitate to die 10,000 times for Wang Ye. Although Wang Ye can find countless people to work for him, once the position of the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet is vacant, there will be a scramble from all sides. Even if the person who finally sits in this position is Wang Ye's loyal follower, not to mention that there will be a lot of incidents in the process, to adapt to this position and handle things with ease, there will also be a process. In addition, the other 3 people in the cabinet all have their own standpoints. Wanting to sit in this position is not easy. It is better to do it like it is now. For Wang Ye, there is no loss, and it also reduces unnecessary trouble and possible unforeseen events. It is said that the Grand Secretary is a capable person. It can be seen that not only is he good at handling political affairs, his skill in flattery is also not bad. Although from the beginning he intended to keep Yuan Ruizhong, no matter what, the other party had to rush to beg for it, and not him revealing his trump card and letting Yuan Ruizhong take the initiative. Moreover, in the current Yuan family, the bad reputation brought by Yuan Fengfei, it was not impossible to wash it clean. In the previous life, everything was exposed. Li Hongyuan now saved his old face and also saved the lives of the entire family. Look, he was so benevolent. Your Highness praises me too much, Yuan Ruizhong said without changing his expression. Therefore, as a qualified scholar official, what he cared about the most would always be the family. When everything else did not go against this principle, he could pamper, love, and hold it. But once it went against this principle, everything else could be abandoned. Dignity, reputation, life, everything else could also turn a soft bone into a hard bone. Yuan Ruizhong's current state was also within Li Hongyuan's expectations. Because of Yuan Fengfei, because of Madame Wei, the blows to him were small. As long as he did not die, the probability of him standing up in the end was more than 90%. Keeping you can indeed save a lot of trouble. Li Hongyuan was not afraid of trouble, but if he could save it, he would save it. Because that would consume more of his energy, he was more willing to use this energy on Yuan. The joy in Yuan Ruizhong's eyes disappeared in a flash. Many thanks, Your Highness. Dare I ask, Your Highness, how should we deal with Madame Wei? This question was purely a matter of business and did not contain any personal feelings, but one could tell from the way he addressed Yuan Ruizhong. Keep her. She knows your body the best. Let her continue to nurse your body. You have to live a few more years so that this prince will not lose money in this deal. If she dies, the people behind her will be alarmed. It is difficult to guarantee that they will not send someone else. Instead of sending someone else, it is better to hold the ready-made one in our hands and let her pass on some things that this prince wants her to pass on. Your Highness is right. Yuan Ruizhong nodded. It seemed that he did not feel uncomfortable keeping such a woman by his side. Another characteristic of scholar officials was that they could bend and stretch to achieve their goals. Under Li Hongyuan's signal, Jiao came in, pinched Madame Wei's chin and quickly stuffed a pill into her mouth. Even if he kept her, he had to minimize her threat. From now on, not to mention martial arts, she would become a slender and weak ordinary woman of the inner residence who would pant after walking a few steps. Every day that Yuan Ruizhong dies is a day that you can live. For the sake of her family's life, Madame Wei would do her best to nurse Yuan Ruizhong's body. Take these letters and read them carefully. With Yuan Darren's intelligence, it should not be difficult to find out who is behind her. Yuan Ruizhong, this woman is with you. If anything happens, don't blame this prince for settling old and new debts. Your Highness, please rest assured. It was said that one would learn from one's mistakes. Yuan Ruizhong had suffered such a big loss. If he still could not control Madame Wei, who had lost her wings, he would have lived for decades in vain. After returning to the capital, this prince will arrange a few people for you. That is the most appropriate. Yuan Ruizhong nodded in agreement without saying anything else. This night had also wasted a lot of time. Li Hongyuan prepared to leave. This subject has one more thing to ask, Your Highness. This subject asks Your Highness to stay for a while longer. Speak. In recent days, this subject seems to have offended Luo Darren in some way, but this subject is completely unaware. This subject is the head of the cabinet, and Luo Darren is the head of the 6 ministries. If this subject and Luo Darren do not see eye to eye for a long time, I'm afraid that there will be more incidents, therefore. Li Hongyuan raised his hand to interrupt him. On the day of the Dragon Boat Festival, Ruan Fengfei secretly drugged Ben Wang's fiancée, causing her to have a slippery pulse for a short period of time. Say, where did your enmity come from? Wan Ruizhong immediately understood the inner workings of the situation. Don't say that Luo Peishan was only verbally provoking him. If it was someone else, they would have rolled up their sleeves and beaten him up. It's this subject's fault. This subject will definitely find an opportunity to apologize to him. As Ruan Ruizhong spoke, he discovered that Jin Qinhuang, who had always been indifferent, actually had a malicious look in his eyes, which coincided with the him in the rumors. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. That powerless Jin Qinhuang, even if he was malicious and ruthless, wouldn't let these old officials care about him. Now that he thought about it, it was really the ignorant who had no fear. He was also glad that Jin Qinhuang didn't really want to take someone's life at the slightest disagreement. Otherwise, who knows how many people would die in court without knowing why. Jin Qinhuang had that ability. Hearing that Jin Qinhuang cared about his current fiancée, he couldn't be blamed for tidying up that vile spawn. He wasn't just deceived by Weisher. That vile spawn pretended to be filial and well-behaved in front of him. Wasn't that also deceiving him? Let's not talk about the matter of her shamelessly recommending herself to the pillow. Let's not talk about her repeatedly scheming against Ben Wang's previous fiancés. As for drugging and sending her to a man's bed, that's a small matter. How many people she killed in your Wan family's backyard, and how she had intimate relations with her cousin in private, it has nothing to do with Ben Wang. Touching Ben Wang's current fiancé, she deserves to die 10,000 deaths. But to let her die like this is rather letting her off too easily. Tomorrow send her to Zhong Qinhuang's hands. In any case, she's not your seed. In the future, just treat it as if this person had never appeared in the Ruan family. Although he already loathed Ruan Fengfei to the extreme, but hearing her conduct and deeds, such a poisonous heart, just like her mother, he still felt like a mouthful of old blood was stuck in his throat. It was unbearable. His illustrious reputation was in vain. How could he be so blind when it came to this pair of mother and daughter? Such a person, it was no wonder that Jin Qinhuang was so disgusted. I will follow Wang Ye's instructions. Li Hongyuan was unhappy, so naturally he would make others unhappy as well. He had always understood the essence of it. Now that Wan Ruizhong happened to bump into the muzzle of the gun, he could only be unlucky. After sending off Li Hongyuan, when Wan Ruizhong faced Weisher again, he retreated with modesty. With a cold and stern face, he condescendingly looked at Weisher, who had become even weaker after taking in Jiu's medicine. It was this woman who made him wear a green hat, seduced his son, and almost harmed the lives of his entire clan. He really hated that he couldn't dismember her body into 10,000 pieces, but Jin Qinhuang said that he wanted to keep her. He also felt that killing her wouldn't resolve his hatred. He boasted of being a gentleman and wouldn't be rough with women, but his face had long been trampled into the mud by this woman. Thus, why should he be polite to her? Didn't they say that he was old and couldn't satisfy her? In the future, he would find a way to satisfy her. Naturally, he wouldn't joke around with his own body. However, it would be too easy to find something to replace it. Before Weisher was injured, before she took that medicine, she didn't fear Wan Ruizhong at all. But now she knew that she was in a weak position. There was no possibility of resistance. When there was nothing to rely on, she naturally couldn't stop the fear in her heart. She shrunk her body, lay. When he saw her take out her previous gentle and caring appearance, there would be no more tenderness in his heart, only disgust and disgust. He crouched down and grabbed Weisher's hair. Don't worry, let's take it slow. Weisher was terrified. He had never seen this kind of Wan Ruizhong. She couldn't help but think of the person who had trained her. That was a memory that she never wanted to recall. Even after more than 20 years, when she thought of it, she would still tremble. Madame Wei probably didn't know that she was gradually creating an old pervert who was becoming more and more humble on the outside and more tactful when dealing with matters. Of course, it was an honor that she was the only one who could see his inner side. Wan Ruizhong wanted to pull her away, but Weisher had only become weaker, not thinner. His current body wasn't very good, so he really didn't have the strength to pull her away. Get lost. He kicked her with his foot. As a prisoner, Weisher was very sensible and moved to the side. Juan Ruizhong picked up the letters on the ground one by one. His movements were quite solemn. He made sure that he found every letter. He was even worried that Weisher had secretly hidden them when they weren't paying attention and even took off her clothes. Probably because his mentality was different, Juan Ruizhong was especially serious when he looked at these letters. He couldn't help but think. There were some things that he didn't even know about. Then he found a few unusual contents. They should have been sent to her by the person behind Weisher. With these he really found some clues. With this kind of method they intended to take over Qiyuan's empire. Did they think that there was no one in Qiyuan? However, Juan Ruizhong was also clear that it was impossible to send only one spy. Since Jin Qinhuang could find Weisher, then those who had the slightest connection with Weisher wouldn't be able to escape from his hands. The others might be another Weisher. Qiyuan had been peaceful in recent years, so Juan Ruizhong wasn't too worried. This night half of it had passed. After that it was peaceful. The next day Juan de Furen was summoned by her father-in-law. It was said that the old Furen was sick and asked her to send 2 people to take care of her. The main courtyard couldn't be left unattended, so she also made arrangements. Juan de Furen was a little shocked at first. Could it be that her father-in-law was really coaxed by that slut? But she didn't dare to say more. She twisted her handkerchief and respectfully responded. Then she personally led people to the main courtyard. The originally locked door was already opened. But when Juan de Furen saw the dying Weisher on the bed, she was finally relieved. It didn't look like she had coaxed the man back. But why did she still have to be served with good food and drink? But before she could make arrangements here, Juan Ruizhong came to find her again. But it wasn't in the front courtyard but at Juan Fengfei's place. Her heart thumped again. She hadn't had time to tell her father-in-law that she had searched Juan Fengfei's courtyard. If he saw Juan Fengfei's miserable appearance, perhaps his heart would soften when she cried. In that case the ones who would suffer would be them. She hurried over. Juan Fengfei didn't have anyone to clean her up. She still looked the same as yesterday. And since then she didn't eat anything. Her entire person looked miserable, sobbing softly. Unfortunately, the scar on her face was too ugly and couldn't be covered. Even if she cried like a pear blossom in the rain, there was no beauty. Juan Fengfei cried while secretly glancing at Juan Ruizhong. In the end she saw that he was indifferent. His face was full of indifference. Her heart was completely cold. Who could tell her what was going on? Why did this old thing turn hostile so thoroughly? Madame Juan let out a sigh of relief. Father, what orders do you have? Juan Ruizhong glanced at her. He knew who did this in this courtyard. Don't do it again. Eldest daughter-in-law, remember there are some things that I don't like people to make decisions on their own. Daughter-in-law will remember. Madame Juan hurriedly replied. Even so, Madame Juan still felt that she couldn't send her away like this. So she ordered people to watch Juan Fengfei. She hurriedly went to see Juan Ruizhong. Of course she didn't dare to say the original words. She just tactfully mentioned it. According to her, he would become mute, unable to speak, unable to write, and unable to speak. No need. The more she did, the more she wanted to cover it up. Since Prince Jin wanted to send her to Prince Zhong, that side should have been taken care of. Prince Jin wanted to use him. Naturally, he wouldn't allow anyone to completely ruin his reputation. Also, if someone really wanted to know something, even if they couldn't speak or write, there were so many people in the world who could read lips. Since he said so, Madame Juan felt that it was inappropriate and could only do as he said. Juan Ruizhong was also not in a hurry to go to Luqingdi's place. The matter of the flood in the south, without him it would be fine. Thus, it was better to take advantage of this time to take care of his body. The body was his capital. He couldn't wait until he returned to the capital for Luqingdi to really fire him. Although Li Hongyuan had a fatal handle on him, Juan Ruizhong's heart was at ease. At least he was very clear about what he wanted to do. He didn't need to worry and be distracted by messy things. But there was one more thing. His sons were all brought to the front. He didn't care about his old face now and directly made it clear to them. No matter if they had an affair with that cheap woman or not, they had to cut off all thoughts. This time he could not pursue it. In the future they would honestly work and live their lives. They were not allowed to take another concubine. If they violated this, they would first be punished according to the family law and then be directly removed from the clan. No matter who it was, they would not be tolerated. Scram. No matter how old they were, no matter what position they sat in the face of the thunderous rage of their father, they were like quails shrinking their heads. Then they dejectedly scram. Standing outside the door, they looked at each other and without saying a word, they went their separate ways. Thus, while Wan Ruizhong was peacefully recuperating, Lu Qingdi and the others were busy. Following the reports that were sent one after another, it could be seen that the flood this time was not far from the truth. Moreover, it might be more serious than expected. However, because his heart was still somewhat confident, Lu Qingdi was not in a hurry and methodically issued decrees to the local government. According to Lu Qingdi's words, Luo Peishan had made great contributions this time. In addition to Li Hongyuan's secret help, Luo Peishan had basically understood all the officials in the Qiyuan. Not only through the files of the Ministry of Personnel, but also through the secret files that Jin Qinhuang had someone give him. The local officials who could be put in important positions were not 100% accurate, but there was at least 70% to 80% accurate. As long as these people were in position, there would basically be no major mistakes. What made people happy was that there were quite a few of these people in their respective positions. Lu Qingdi felt that he was wise, and when Rui Qinhuang, Gong Qinhuang and the others found out that there were some of their people, they were secretly happy. Even Ding Guogong wrote a letter to be sent back to the capital to be presented to the Empress. He wanted to see if she could make another move in the capital. Who would have thought that those people were only arranged by Li Hongyuan 1 or 2 years ago or even 3 or 4 years ago? Methodically dealing with these matters, the people who went to the western border also sent back news that the matter was basically investigated. The countermeasures discussed by all parties had basically come to a conclusion. And this year the 3 people who passed the Jinshe examination as well as Sun Bingbai, all performed very well. They were all talents with potential. Jiao Wangye humbly bowed in person. These were the blessings of the Qiyuan. https://11/11807/6653239. Chapter 207. How beautiful and festive would it be after it was lit up? The younger children of the Luo family were playing in the courtyard with lanterns in their hands. At this time no one would talk to them about etiquette. In fact, the children of the Luo family were not so strict. As for the other masters of the Luo family, they were scattered all over the courtyard, leisurely eating snacks and chatting. It was rare for the whole family to be so free. Jingwan leaned her body slightly and rested her elbows on the table to support her cheeks. Her expression was calm and relaxed as her eyes swept over the lanterns in the hands of her younger siblings. Not to mention those extremely beautiful paper bamboo lanterns, there were also very simple grapefruit lanterns, pumpkin lanterns, watermelon lanterns, orange lanterns, apple lanterns, and so on. The grapefruit lanterns were made by hollowing out the grapefruit and removing the inner white layer, leaving only a thin layer. Various vivid and exquisite patterns were carved on the grapefruit and tied with a string and lit with candles. The other lanterns were basically done in the same way. Most of these lanterns were made by ordinary families who did not have the money to buy lanterns for their children. It was unknown when it had become popular among the wealthy families, but the craftsmanship was more exquisite. It was just that the heart was removed and the carvings on the outer shell were still the most common. There were those who were skillful enough to make lanterns that were comparable to lanterns. However, the Luo family's lanterns did not change their original appearance this time. They simply worked on the outer layer. Jingwan had taken a closer look at the lanterns and was impressed by the craftsmen. If it was in her previous life, these craftsmen would be considered master craftsmen. However, in the current world, craftsmen of this level were too common. Every household had their own craftsmen. Jingwan saw an oversized wax-gourd lantern. It had the most common cylindrical shape, but the head was a little too big. It was more than a meter long and thick. An adult probably wouldn't be able to carry it. Jingwan was a little surprised. Even in her previous life, it was rare to see such a big winter melon, right? Even though the lantern was placed horizontally, the shape of the winter melon did not change at all. It was enough to show that the flesh of the melon was still quite thick. A 10-year-old boy was still struggling to carry it. It attracted not only Jingwan's attention, but the other children also gathered around. Even the adults would say a few words to the wax-gourd lamp. Children were very curious about strange things. With this curiosity, they naturally wanted to take it for themselves. The older ones would probably look at it eagerly, but the younger ones did not know how to restrain themselves and directly reached out to snatch it. As a result, it was no surprise that a battle for the winter melon lantern broke out. A group of little kids started to fight, but the older ones knew their limits. In addition, there were servants watching from the side. When they really got angry, they would pull them apart at the first moment. Then the others would happily watch the show. Jingwan was speechless for a moment. She saw that their respective parents were all in high spirits. Speaking of which, when she was in Cheat-en Prefecture, such a situation had never occurred. Could it be that this was a more popular way of loving each other? The end result was the death of the winter melon lantern. After it became a lantern, before it was lit, there was a deafening cry. The juice from the spoiled winter melon made the little kids dirty. In the process of fighting, their hair was messed up and their clothes were scattered. It was a miserable sight. As if they had seen enough, the head of the household, Luo Peishan, waved his hand. Okay, all the children in each branch took them back to wash up and change clothes. Don't think that just because you seemed to be calm from the beginning to the end, no one noticed your evil nature. You old bastard. After the initial shock, Sun Yijia could not help but cover her mouth and laugh. She looked very relaxed and happy. This kind of thing would never happen in Duke Dinggua's prefecture. If it was really a fight between children, the adults behind them could make a scene. The most disgusting thing was not necessarily out of sincere protection of their children. The children's injuries and cries were all bargaining chips. They might even deliberately magnify the bargaining chips. When the little kids returned one by one, they were clean and had innocent smiles on their faces again. The servants had already brought all kinds of food and wine to them one after another. Night began to fall and the lanterns in the courtyard were lit one by one. From all directions the lanterns lit up one by one. Jingwan felt that the feeling was a little strange, and after all the lanterns were lit up, it was as she had expected, unusually beautiful. Looking at the sky again, although it was not completely dark yet, the full moon was already hanging in the sky and the stars were scattered in the sky. There were no dark clouds in the sky, and one could imagine that tonight would be a very good night to admire the full moon. When the sky was completely dark, a large incense table was set up in the courtyard. On the table were fruits, snacks, and other offerings. Among them, mooncakes and watermelons were absolutely indispensable. The watermelons had to be cut into the shape of a lotus. The mooncakes on the incense burner table were bestowed by Emperor Lu Qingdi. Of course, there was also a specially made reunion mooncake which was quite big. Under the moonlight, the statue of the moon god was placed in the direction of the moon. The red candles were lit high. With Madame Luo taking the lead, the women of the family took turns to worship. That's right, only the women participated. The men from old to young obediently watched from the side. As the saying went, men don't worship the moon, women don't worship the kitchen stove. The moon belonged to the moon. The moon god Chang'e was a woman, so only the women could worship the moon. If a man kowtowed humbly, it was a sign that he had bad intentions. Correspondingly, according to the folklore, the kitchen god was the incarnation of a mythical figure like Emperor Yan or Zhurong. In the dynasty, men and women should not touch each other. Therefore it was against etiquette for women to worship him. What the hell was this? Jingwan could only laugh at this in her heart. After worshipping the moon, Madame Luo cut open the reunion mooncakes. The number of people in Luo Peishan's family, including the eldest grandson of the first branch, had to be cut. Speaking of which, Luo Peishan's family was all in the capital. If it was in the past with Madame Wang as the chief knife, she would also have to include those in Cheat-en Prefecture. Since Jingwan and the others were in Cheat-en Prefecture, they would have to include those in the capital. However, every time this happened, Luo Peishan would always mention something about his second brother, the Luo second master, who had been a great scholar for 20 years and had students all over the world. Cutting mooncakes was a technical job. Every piece had to be the same size. However, this did not seem to be a difficult task for Madame Luo. Although the speed was a bit slow, the final result was gratifying. Everyone present took a piece and the rest were placed on the incense table. The family ate happily, but there were also those who felt sour in their hearts. For example, the concubines of each branch were allowed to come out and gather together today. However, whether it was worshipping or mooncakes, they did not have a share. Then there was another person who felt awkward. That was the Gu family. It seemed reasonable that Madame Luo did not prepare a share for them. However, the treatment that they received was the same as the concubines of the Luo family. wasn't it? After finishing the small piece of mooncake, everyone sat down and began to eat dinner. Of course, this was not a simple evening. Games, moon appreciation dinner, these three were one. Of course, the games were more artistic, such as riddles, couplets, and connecting dragons. There was no reward for correct answers. If they did not connect, they would have to drink as punishment. Osmanthus wine. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, looking up at the moon and smelling the scent of osmanthus, drinking a cup of osmanthus wine, celebrating the sweetness of the family, was no less than a great enjoyment. This year's osmanthus wine seems to be a bit different. Why does it feel better than the previous years?